The
As you can see
Montana
on the
sky
satellite
burned
feed,
gold
the
and
target moved
crimson
location
as the sun dipped
0400
behind
hours.
the Bitterroot
The
Mountains.
bruises confirm close combat,
Sarah
sir.
Mitchell stood at the
We have a
fence line of
72-hour
her
window.
small ranch, hands resting on weathered wood that had known 15 winters under her care. 35 years old, but carrying the weight of lifetimes in her quiet gray eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen too much. The kind that no longer flinched at sudden movements or unexpected sounds. 7 years she had lived here under the name Claire Johnson. 7 years of teaching children how to sit a horse properly, how to read the animal's mood through the shift of muscle beneath the saddle. 7 years of quiet mornings and quieter nights. 7 years of running from a past that refused to stay buried. The horses in the near pasture lifted their heads in unison, ears pricked forward toward the long dirt road that wound through the pines. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her hip, where a sidearm used to rest, before she remembered she was not that person anymore. Had not been for a long time. The dust cloud rising through the trees told her someone was coming. Someone who knew where to find her. Very few people knew where to find her. The truck that emerged from the tree line was a battered Ford F-250. Forest green paint faded to something closer to sage, more rust than metal in the wheel wells. It moved slowly, deliberately, the way a man drives when he has driven 10,000 roads and learned that speed solves nothing. The vehicle stopped 30 yards from the house. The engine ticked in the sudden silence. A meadowlark called from somewhere in the tall grass. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out with the careful movements of someone whose body remembered younger days but no longer quite delivered on those memories. 68 years old, broad shoulders that had narrowed with time but still carried authority in every line. Silver hair cut military short, face weathered by decades of sun and decisions that left marks deeper than any weather could carve. Colonel William Harrison, retired, though men like him never truly retired from what they were. Sarah had not seen Bull Harrison in 7 years, had not spoken to him in longer, but she would have known that silhouette anywhere, would have recognized the set of those shoulders in complete darkness. Bull had been her commanding officer for 8 years, had recruited her straight out of a troubled childhood in the foster system, had shaped her from an angry 17-year-old with more potential than discipline into something else entirely. The Sentinel. That was what they called her in the units that operated in shadows. The Sentinel who never slept, who saw everything, who protected the protocols that kept good people safe and bad people afraid. Bull stood beside his truck for a long moment, just looking at her across the distance, not moving closer, giving her space to decide. That was always his way. Teach them to think, teach them to choose, then live with the consequences. Sarah walked toward him slowly, each step measured, each step a small surrender to the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. As she got closer, she could see the changes that time had written across his features, the deeper lines around his eyes, the slight stoop to shoulders that used to stand parade ground straight, the way he favored his left leg just a fraction. But his eyes were the same, sharp, clear, missing nothing. They stopped 5 feet apart, the kind of distance that military men maintain even with people they love. Sarah, Bull said. His voice was gravel and smoke, worn smooth by years of shouting orders across training fields and speaking quietly into radios during operations that never made the news. Bull. She kept her own voice neutral, gave nothing away. Old habits. You look good, healthy. You look old. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. I am old. Comes with the territory when you survive long enough. What are you doing here? He glanced toward the house, toward the barn beyond it where she kept her working horses, toward the small arena where tomorrow she would teach the Miller girl how to post a trot without bouncing like a sack of feed. Looked at all of it with the eye of a man assessing a life someone had built. Nice place, he said. Peaceful. It is. Must be hard giving it up. Sarah felt something cold slide down her spine. I'm not giving it up. Not yet. Bull turned those clear eyes back to her. But you will. You drove 7 hours to tell me that? I drove 7 hours to ask you. He paused, weight behind the words. But we both know you will. A horse whinnied from the barn. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice and fell silent. The wind moved through the pines with a sound like ocean waves on a shore Sarah had not seen in years. Come inside, she said finally. I'll make coffee. The kitchen was small but well kept. Copper pots hung from hooks above the stove. Herbs dried in bundles near the window. A life built deliberately, carefully, without the chaos that used to define every moment. Sarah measured grounds into the percolator with steady hands, while Bull lowered himself into a chair at the rough pine table. He moved like a man whose joints argued with every decision. "How's Margaret?" Sarah asked as she worked. "Strong as ever. Sends her love. Says you never call." Calling would defeat the purpose of disappearing. That's what I told her. Bull watched Sarah move through the familiar rhythms of making coffee. She didn't buy it either. "How did you find me?" "I never lost you, Sarah. I've always known where you were." She turned to look at him. "For 7 years? For 7 years. You think I'd let you vanish completely? You think I'd train someone like you and then just let them disappear into nothing without keeping one eye on the road?" Sarah poured coffee into 2 heavy ceramic mugs, set one in front of Bull, took the chair across from him. "If you knew where I was, why come now?" Bull wrapped both hands around the mug, absorbing the warmth, or maybe just needing something to hold. "Because now I need you. You retired 5 years ago. Retirement doesn't change some things. Doesn't change who you are, what you owe. I don't owe anything anymore. I paid my debts. Not all of them." Bull met her eyes across the table. "David Chen is alive." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. The mug stopped halfway to her lips. The kitchen seemed to tilt and settle. Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, everything had just stopped. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "I thought the same thing for 6 years. Thought we'd buried him. Thought we'd said goodbye. Thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong." "Syria." The word came out flat, empty. "Syria was 7 years ago. I was there. I held him while he bled out. I heard his last words." "You heard words. You saw blood. You believed what you needed to believe to survive what happened." Bull's voice was gentle now, the voice he used with young soldiers after their first real taste of combat, after they learned that training and reality were not the same thing. But David Chen didn't die that night. He faked his death. Sarah set the mug down carefully. Precise. The way she did everything when emotions threatened to overwhelm training. "Why?" "To protect you. To protect the mission. To stay alive long enough to finish what he started." Bull pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. Old paper, worn at the edges. He laid it on the table between them like a dealer showing his cards. "3 months ago, I started getting messages. Coded. Using protocols only a handful of people knew. It took me 2 months to decrypt them, another month to verify they were real." Sarah stared at the envelope but did not reach for it. "What did they say?" "That David was compromised. That he'd been working undercover for years, infiltrating an organization called the Architects. That his cover was blown and he was in immediate danger. That I needed to find the only person he trusted to come get him." "Who are the Architects?" "Rogue officers, mostly retired, some still in positions of influence. Men who feel betrayed by the government they served. Men who want to take back control." Bull opened the envelope, spread photographs across the table. Grainy surveillance images. David Chen, older, harder, standing in shadows and speaking to men whose faces were turned away. They're recruiting, building something, and they want access to something David helped create 15 years ago. Sarah looked at the photographs, at the ghost of a man she thought she'd buried, at the face she saw sometimes in dreams that always ended the same way, with blood and blame and words that made no sense, even after 7 years of trying to understand them. "The Omega Protocol," she said. Bull nodded slowly. "David and you were the architects of Omega, the fail-safe, the last line of defense if everything else fails. The system that requires 2 people, 2 sets of biometrics, 2 conscious choices to activate or deactivate. 12 people in the world have Omega clearance. David was one. You were another." "Were, past tense. I resigned. My clearance was revoked." "Clearance can be revoked on paper. But what you know doesn't get unlearned. What you built doesn't get unbuilt. The Architects know this. They have David. They're torturing him for information, for codes, for access to something that should never be in anyone's hands." Sarah stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the horses in the pasture, at the simple life she had built from the wreckage of who she used to be. "Why come to me? There are others, other operators, other people with clearance." "Because there aren't. Not really." Bull's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, moved to stand beside her, not touching, just present. 2 of the 12 Omega holders have died in the last month. Car accidents, random violence. Nothing provable, but nothing random either. The architects are eliminating access points. Soon David will be the only one left who can give them what they want, unless you help me stop them. Where is he? Fort Bragg. They're holding him in the old underground facility, the Cold War bunker complex that was supposed to be sealed 30 years ago. Fort Bragg, Sarah's voice was hollow. You want me to go back? I want you to save a good man's life. I want you to stop something catastrophic. I want you to be who you were trained to be, who you are, whether you hide on a ranch in Montana or not. Sarah was quiet for a long time, watching the sun sink lower, watching shadows stretch across the pasture like reaching fingers. You said David sent messages. That means he chose to reach out, chose to involve you. Why not me directly? Bull was quiet, too quiet. Sarah turned to look at him. Bull, why not contact me directly? Because, he said slowly, David is my godson. Sarah felt the floor shift again. What? His father and I served together in Vietnam. When David was born, I was there. When his father died, I helped raise him. When he joined the service, I guided him. When he met you at training, I already knew he was special. That you both were. Bull's voice roughened. I've spent 7 years believing my godson was dead. 7 years carrying that weight. When I got those messages, when I realized he was alive, everything changed. You should have told me, back then, when we were working together. Probably, but I didn't. Chain of command gets complicated when family is involved. I made choices. Some of them were wrong, but the choice to come here now, to ask you for help, that's not wrong. That's the first right thing I've done in years. Sarah looked at this man who had been more father to her than anyone, who had taken a broken teenager and given her purpose, who had taught her not just how to fight, but why to fight, whose godson she had held while he died. Except he hadn't died, and now she was learning that everything she thought she knew about that night was built on lies. I need time, she said. We don't have time. Every day that passes is another day David is being tortured. Another day the architects get closer to breaking him. I need one night to think, to decide. Bull studied her face, then nodded. One night I'll sleep in my truck. You'll sleep in the guest room. We're not savages. Something that might have been relief crossed his weathered features. Thank you. That night, Sarah lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. Could not sleep. The past 7 years had been about forgetting, about building walls between who she was and who she had been, about creating distance from the violence and the choices and the weight of responsibility that came with being the Sentinel. But memory is not a thing that stays buried when you want it to. She remembered meeting David Chen for the first time, 20 years old. Both of them recruited into a program that did not officially exist. Project Sentinel, the best of the best, they were told. The ones who would safeguard the safeguards, who would build the systems that protected everything else. David was brilliant, quiet, methodical. Where Sarah was instinct and reflex, David was calculation and precision. They balanced each other, pushed each other, became partners in a way that transcended simple friendship. Brother and sister in everything but blood. Together, they designed an Omega protocol, a system so secure that it required 2 people to operate, 2 complete sets of biometrics, 2 living, conscious, willing participants. Impossible to fake, impossible to force. The ultimate fail-safe against the nightmare scenario where someone managed to compromise the entire chain of command. For 8 years, they were inseparable. For 8 years, they were legends in a world that did not acknowledge legends. The Sentinel and the Ghost. That was David's call sign. The Ghost. Because he moved through systems and situations like something not quite real. There and not there. Seen and unseen. Then came Syria. The memories of that night were fragmented. Broken glass in her mind that never quite fit back together properly. The mission had been straightforward. Infiltrate a facility. Extract intelligence. Get out clean. But nothing was clean that night. Ambush in the darkness. Gunfire. David going down hard. Sarah dragging him into cover while bullets sparked off stone walls. She remembered his face in the darkness. Pale, lips moving. Blood spreading across his tactical vest in a bloom of black that looked like ink in the moonlight. She remembered leaning close to hear his last words. Words that made no sense then and made no sense now, even after 7 years of trying to decode them. Protect the protocol. Not protect me. not save yourself, protect the protocol. She had thought he meant Omega, had spent the next year writing reports and attending debriefings and explaining over and over what had happened. But there were gaps in her memory, spaces where time seemed to skip. The official investigation concluded that David Chen had died as a result of hostile fire, that Sarah Mitchell had acted appropriately, that no blame was assigned. But Sarah knew better, knew there were bullets that came from behind them that night, knew that something was wrong in ways she could not articulate. The investigation was closed. David was buried with honors. And 6 months later, Sarah resigned. Could not carry the weight anymore. Could not be the sentinel when she had failed to protect the one person who mattered most. Now Bull was telling her David was alive, that everything was a lie, that the death was staged, that David had spent 7 years undercover, infiltrating an organization of rogue officers, gathering evidence, staying dead to stay alive, and that he was in trouble, real trouble, the kind that required someone to ride to the rescue, someone who knew him, someone who understood what he had built, someone who could get inside Fort Bragg and extract him from a facility that was not supposed to exist. Someone like Sarah Mitchell. Sarah turned on the lamp, gave up on sleep, pulled an old footlocker from beneath the bed, opened it for the first time in 7 years. Inside were the remnants of her previous life, uniforms folded with military precision, medals in their cases, photographs of people who were dead or might as well be. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, the badge. Her Omega clearance badge, old metal, worn edges, no holographic seals or modern chips, just solid construction from an era when things were built to last. Bull had said she should keep it, had said that even if she walked away, the badge was hers, part of her. Something that could not be taken away just because she wanted it to be. Sarah held it in her palm, felt the weight, the history, the responsibility that came with being one of 12 people on Earth who could authorize the ultimate failsafe. The sky outside her window was beginning to lighten. False dawn. The hour when night gives way to morning, but the sun has not yet committed to rising. The hour when soldiers move, when operations begin, when decisions made in darkness have to survive the light of day. Sarah got dressed, not in ranch clothes, in black cargo pants and a dark shirt, practical boots, hair pulled back tight. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who was neither Claire Johnson, the horse trainer, nor Sarah Mitchell, the sentinel. Someone in between. Someone who had to decide which side to fall toward. Bull was in the kitchen when she came downstairs, already awake, already dressed. 2 fresh mugs of coffee on the table. He looked up as she entered, and Sarah saw the hope in his eyes, the desperate hope of a man who had run out of options and was betting everything on one last card. "I can't promise I'm who you remember," Sarah said. 7 years is a long time. People change. People change, but what they're made of doesn't. Bull slid one of the mugs across the table. "I'm not asking for the Sentinel. I'm asking for Sarah Mitchell, the woman who never left a soldier behind, the woman who understands loyalty. That woman is enough." "What's the plan?" Relief flooded Bull's features. "We drive to Fort Bragg. We meet with General Marcus Aldridge. He's base commander now. He knows we're coming, knows the situation. We go in through official channels, get clearance, and extract David from the facility. If it was that simple, you wouldn't need me. It's not that simple. The architects have infiltrated Fort Bragg. We don't know how deep. We don't know who to trust. Aldridge is solid. Beyond that, everyone is suspect. And you want me to walk into a compromised facility to extract a man who's been tortured for information while not knowing who's friend and who's enemy?" "Yes." Sarah picked up the coffee, took a long drink, set the mug down with a decisive click. "I need to make arrangements for the ranch, for the horses, for the kids I'm supposed to teach this week." "How long?" 2 hours. "I'll wait." Sarah spent those 2 hours making phone calls, arranging for her neighbor to feed the horses, canceling lessons with apologetic explanations about a family emergency, packing a small duffel with clothes she had not worn in years, checking equipment that had sat dormant but not forgotten in the back of her closet. The Glock 19 was exactly where she had left it, cleaned, oiled, unloaded but ready. 3 magazines, hollow points. The weight in her hand was memory made solid. She had fired this weapon thousands of times, had qualified expert every year she served, had never fired it at another human being, and had hoped she never would again. Sarah loaded the magazines, loaded the weapon, safed it, holstered it inside her waistband at the small of her back. The cold metal against her spine was a reminder of who she used to be, who she might have to be again. Bull was waiting by his truck when she emerged with her duffel. He looked at her differently now, not as the ranch woman he had found yesterday, as the operator he had trained. The recognition in his eyes was bittersweet. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." They drove east through the mountains as the sun climbed behind them, turning the sky from gray to blue to the kind of perfect Montana morning that made everything seem possible. But Sarah knew better, knew that beauty was just a mask over the grinding machinery of reality, that perfect mornings could turn into nightmare afternoons, that peace was always temporary. Bull drove in silence for the first hour, giving her space. Finally, he spoke without taking his eyes from the road. "I never wanted to drag you back into this, but you did anyway." "Yes." "Why? Really, not the official reason, the real one." Bull was quiet for several miles. The road unwound beneath them. "Because David asked for you specifically in his message. He said if things went wrong, if he was compromised, I should find Sarah Mitchell. Not any other operator, not backup from active units. You, only you." "Why me?" "He didn't say, but I think I know." "Tell me." "Because you're the only person he trusts completely. The only person who was there in the beginning when Omega was just an idea. The only person who knows every layer, every failsafe, every backdoor. The only person who could understand what he's been trying to do for 7 years." Sarah watched the landscape roll past. "He's been trying to take down the architects from the inside." "Yes, gathering evidence, building a case, but something went wrong. His cover was blown. They captured him 3 months ago. I've been trying to mount a rescue ever since, but kept hitting walls. Official channels want proof, want authorizations, want things that take time. Time David doesn't have. So you came to me. So I came to you." Bull glanced at her. "I'm 68 years old, Sarah. I've got arthritis in both knees and a heart condition the doctors think I don't know about. I can't do this myself. Can barely climb stairs without getting winded. But I couldn't let it go. Couldn't let David die while I sat in my retirement doing nothing. You should have called me sooner." "Probably. But I hoped I could solve it without pulling you back, without making you choose between the life you built and the life you left behind." They stopped for gas in Billings. Sarah bought coffee and a sandwich she did not eat. Bull made phone calls to people he would not name. They got back on the road. The miles accumulated. Montana gave way to Wyoming, gave way to Colorado. The landscape changed from mountains to plains to rolling hills. They drove through the day and into the evening. Stopped at a motel outside Kansas City to sleep a few hours. Sarah lay in the dark and listened to Bull snoring through the thin wall. Tomorrow they would reach Fort Bragg. Tomorrow she would step back into a world she thought she had left forever. Tomorrow she would see if 7 years had made her stronger or just more broken. She thought about the children she taught, about the Miller girl who was just learning to post, about the Rodriguez boy who was afraid of horses until Sarah showed him how to read their body language, about the quiet life she had built and was about to risk for a man who had been dead for 7 years. But David was not dead, had never been dead, had been fighting a different kind of war while Sarah was teaching children how to sit a horse. The guilt of that realization was sharp. While she had been healing, he had been suffering. While she had been building peace, he had been drowning in shadows. Morning came gray and cold. They drove the last hours in heavy silence. Bull's tension was visible now in his tight grip on the wheel, in the way his jaw clenched whenever they passed highway patrol, in the careful way he checked mirrors at every intersection. "You're worried," Sarah said. "I'm terrified. If the architects know we're coming, if they have people watching the gates, this could go sideways before we even get inside. Then we trust that Aldridge has secured the approach. We walk in like we belong, like we're exactly what we're supposed to be." "Which is what?" Sarah smiled without humor. "Ghosts coming home." Fort Bragg appeared through the morning mist like something from another world. Sprawling, organized, powerful, fences and guard posts and buildings that stretched to the horizon. The machinery of defense made visible. Sarah had not seen this place in 7 years, had hoped never to see it again. But here she was. Bull pulled to the side of the road about a mile from the main gate, put the truck in park, turned to look at her with an expression that broke her heart. "This is it. Last chance to turn back. Last chance to go home to your ranch and Your horses and your quiet life. I won't blame you. I'll understand. I'll find another way. There is no other way. You said so yourself. I know, but I needed to offer. Bull. Sarah put her hand on his arm. David was my brother, is my brother. You were my father in every way that matters. I'm not walking away. I'm walking in. We're going to get him out. We're going to stop the architects, and then I'm going back to Montana, and I'm going to teach the Miller girl how to post a trot without bouncing like a sack of feed, in that order. Bull blinked hard, nodded, put the truck back in gear. They approached the checkpoint slowly. 3 soldiers in full battle dress stood at the gate, young, alert, weapons not pointed but ready. One stepped forward as Bull rolled to a stop, leaned down to the window, eyes scanning the truck interior with practiced efficiency. Colonel Harrison and guest, Bull said, expected by General Aldridge. The soldier checked a tablet, frowned, checked again. Sir, I have Colonel Harrison on the list, but no guest. Check under Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell. The soldier's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough. He straightened, stepped back, spoke into his radio in a voice Sarah could not hear. A moment passed, then another. The soldier returned to the window. Ma'am, could you please step out of the vehicle? Sarah opened her door, stepped out slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. The morning air was crisp, the smell of pine and diesel and possibility. The soldier was perhaps 25, lean, professional. His name tag read Morrison. He studied Sarah's face like he was trying to place her, like he had seen her photograph but could not quite believe the reality matched the image. Ma'am, do you have identification? Sarah reached slowly into her jacket, pulled out the badge, the old Omega clearance badge that should have been deactivated 7 years ago. Held it up in the morning light. Lieutenant Morrison stared at it. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, something close to fear. He reached for his radio, stopped, looked at Sarah again, then at Bull sitting calm in the truck, then back at Sarah. Please wait here, ma'am. Morrison walked back to the guard post, picked up a phone, spoke urgently into it while watching Sarah the entire time. She could see other soldiers gathering, could feel the weight of attention shifting toward her. This was the moment, the fulcrum. Either they would let her in or this would become complicated very quickly. Morrison returned. His demeanor had changed, more formal, more careful. Ma'am, Colonel, please proceed to Building 7. General Aldridge is waiting. The gate opened. Bull drove through. Sarah got back in the truck. Neither of them spoke as they navigated the base roads, past barracks and training facilities and motor pools, past the organized chaos of a military installation that never slept, toward Building 7, which Sarah remembered as the administrative heart of special operations. General Marcus Aldridge was waiting on the steps when they pulled up. 62 years old, broad through the chest, hair gone white, but eyes still sharp. He watched Bull park and both occupants exit with an expression that held relief and concern in equal measure. Bull, Aldridge said, you actually brought her. I actually brought her, Bull confirmed. Aldridge turned his attention to Sarah. The Sentinel, I wondered if I'd ever see you again. General, Sarah kept her voice neutral. We don't have time for pleasantries. Come inside, we need to talk. And we need to do it quickly because the situation has deteriorated since Bull and I last spoke. They followed Aldridge into the building, past security checkpoints, past soldiers who gave Sarah curious looks, into a conference room that was swept for surveillance and secured against electronic eavesdropping. Aldridge closed the door, engaged multiple locks, turned to face them with the weight of command sitting heavy on his shoulders. David Chen is alive, Aldridge just said without preamble. We've confirmed his location in the old underground facility beneath the base. The architects are holding him there. They've been interrogating him for 3 months. We believe they're close to breaking him. How close? Sarah asked. Days, maybe hours. David is strong, but everyone has limits. What's the plan for extraction? Aldridge's expression darkened. That's where things get complicated. I can't use official channels. The architects have infiltrated too deeply. I don't know who I can trust anymore, even in my own command structure. Then how do we get him out? You go in, tonight. Small team. People I trust absolutely. You extract David and you get out. No official record, no backup. If this goes wrong, I'll disavow any knowledge. Sarah looked at Bull, at Aldridge, At the map of Fort Bragg spread across the conference table, at the old underground facility marked in red, at the layers of security that would need to be breached, at the risk written in every line of the plan. "Who's on the team?" she asked. "You, Lieutenant Jake Morrison from the gate. He's young but solid. His father served with distinction. And my niece, Captain Elena Rodriguez. She's my cybersecurity specialist. Those three plus whatever Bull can provide from outside. That's not much of a team. It's the team we have, the team we can trust, the team that has to be enough." Sarah studied the map, calculating, planning, falling back into rhythms she thought she had forgotten. "I'll need equipment, weapons, access codes, everything you have on the facility layout. You'll have it, but there's something else you need to know." Aldridge's voice dropped. "One of my senior officers, Sergeant Marcus Webb, has been acting suspicious. I think he might be compromised, but I can't prove it, can't move against him without triggering whoever he reports to. So we assume everyone is hostile except the people in this room." "Yes. And if we're wrong, if Morrison or Rodriguez are compromised, then we're dead. But I've known them both for years. If I can't trust them, I can't trust anyone." The door to the conference room opened. Sarah's hand moved toward her weapon, stopped when she saw who entered. A man in his mid-40s, sergeant stripes, hard eyes, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Marcus Webb, the man Aldridge suspected. "General Coup," Webb said. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. Multiple contacts on the perimeter. Could be nothing, but could be something." Aldridge stood. "Where?" "Southeast quadrant, near the old facility." Sarah and Bull exchanged glances. Too convenient, too coincidental. Webb's eyes moved to Sarah. Recognition flickered across his features. "Ma'am, I didn't know we had visitors." "Sergeant Webb, this is Sarah Mitchell. She's here to consult on a sensitive matter." "Mitchell." Webb seemed to taste the name. "The Sentinel, heard stories about you. Most of them aren't true." "Most of them?" Webb smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "The general didn't mention you were coming." "Last-minute decision," Bull said. Webb looked at Bull, at Sarah, at Aldridge. Something calculating moved behind his expression. "Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoy your visit." He left. The door closed behind him. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "That was a mistake," Sarah said quietly. "Now he knows I'm here." "Now someone knows you're here," Aldridge corrected. "And whoever that someone is, they're going to respond, which means we're out of time." "When do we move?" "Tonight, 2200 hours. I'll have Morrison and Rodriguez briefed by 1800. You and Bull prepare however you need to prepare. And Sarah?" "Yes, sir?" "Don't die. I've gotten enough ghosts already. Don't need any more." Sarah smiled without humor. "I'll do my best, General." They left the conference room. Bull's face was grim. "Webb's going to report this. The architects will know you're coming." "Good," Sarah said. "Good? If they know I'm coming, they'll prepare for me. They'll focus on me, which means they're not focusing on David, not thinking about escape routes or contingencies. They're thinking about how to stop the Sentinel." "And how do they stop the Sentinel?" Sarah touched the badge in her pocket, felt its weight, its history. "They can't, because the Sentinel doesn't exist anymore. I'm just Sarah Mitchell, horse trainer from Montana, who's very motivated to save her brother." They walked out into the afternoon sun. Fort Bragg stretched around them. Somewhere beneath their feet, in old Cold War tunnels that were supposed to be sealed, David Chen was being tortured for information he would die before giving. Somewhere in these buildings, the architects were planning, preparing, getting ready to stop an extraction that could not be stopped. Sarah looked up at the clouds moving east, at a world that kept turning whether anyone was ready or not. 7 years she had hidden, 7 years she had run, 7 years she had tried to be someone else. Tonight she would remember who she was. Tonight the Sentinel would walk again. And everyone would remember why that name used to make strong men afraid. The sun hung low over Fort Bragg, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. Sarah stood in the small quarters General Aldridge had assigned her, unpacking equipment that felt both familiar and foreign in her hands. The Glock sat on the narrow bed beside tactical gear she had not worn in 7 years. Black fatigues, load-bearing vest, communications equipment, the uniform of someone who operated in shadows. Bull was in the adjacent room, moving slowly as he checked his own preparations. Through the thin wall, Sarah could hear him grunting with effort, heard the creak of joints that had seen too many years and too many hard landings. He was supposed to stay outside during the operation. Command from the van, But Sarah knew that look in his eyes, the look of a man who would not sit safely while others risked everything. 1800 hours, time for the briefing. Sarah gathered her gear and walked down the corridor toward the conference room. Soldiers passed her in the hallway, young men and women in various uniforms, going about the business of a military base at the end of a working day. Some glanced at her curiously. Most did not look at all. She was just another person in tactical clothing, just another operator in a place full of operators. But those who had been around long enough, those who remembered the stories, they looked twice, looked at her face and then looked away quickly like they had seen something they were not supposed to see. The conference room was the same one from earlier, same table, same maps. But now there were two additional people present. A young man in Army combat uniform stood at attention near the window. Late 20s, clean-shaven, eyes that moved constantly, taking in everything, missing nothing. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, the same officer who had stopped her at the checkpoint that morning. The same young man who had looked at her badge like he was seeing a ghost. Beside him stood a woman in her early 30s, captain's bars on her collar, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that held intelligence and something else. Determination, maybe, or the kind of focused intensity that came from knowing lives depended on getting everything exactly right. Captain Elena Rodriguez, Aldridge's niece, the cybersecurity specialist who would be their eyes and ears in the digital realm. General Aldridge stood at the head of the table. Bull entered a moment after Sarah, moving carefully, favoring that left leg. The door closed, locks engaged. The room became a sealed environment where secrets could be spoken. Everyone here knows why we're gathered, Aldridge began without preamble. For those who don't know Sarah Mitchell, she's the best extraction specialist we ever produced. For those who don't know Lieutenant Morrison or Captain Rodriguez, they're two of the finest soldiers currently serving at this base. Together, the three of you are going to do something that officially isn't happening. You're going to infiltrate the old underground facility and extract David Chen. Morrison shifted his weight. Sarah saw the movement, saw the tension in his shoulders. The young lieutenant was nervous. Good. Fear kept you sharp, kept you alive. The facility has 5 levels, Aldridge continued, pointing to schematics spread across the table. Built in the 1960s as a command bunker in case of nuclear war, sealed in the 90s when it was deemed obsolete. Except it wasn't sealed. The architects have been using it for at least 6 months, maybe longer. Elena spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady, professional. I've been monitoring network traffic. The facility is drawing power, significant power. Whatever they're doing down there requires substantial computing resources. David Chen, Sarah said quietly. They're trying to crack Omega Protocol. That takes processing power. Which means they're getting desperate, Bull added, getting close to breaking him. Morrison cleared his throat. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly is Omega Protocol? Sarah looked at Aldridge. The general nodded. Permission to explain. Omega Protocol is a fail-safe, Sarah said. Last line of defense if the entire command structure is compromised. It requires 2 people with Omega clearance to activate or deactivate. Both people must be present. Both must be willing. Both must pass biometric verification. It can't be forced, can't be faked. It's designed to prevent exactly what the architects are trying to do. Which is what? Take control of systems that should never be in anyone's hands. Sarah's voice was flat, empty of emotion. Nuclear authorization, communications, command and control, everything. Morrison's face paled slightly. And David Chen is one of the keyholder people. Was, Sarah corrected. His clearance was revoked when he was declared dead 7 years ago. But what he knows doesn't get unlearned. The codes, the protocols, the back doors, all still in his head. And you're the other keyholder, Elena said. Not a question, a statement. I was until I resigned. But you still remember. Yes. The room was quiet for a moment. The weight of what they were discussing settling over everyone like a physical presence. Morrison looked at Sarah with new understanding, with something approaching awe. My father served under you, Morrison said suddenly. In Afghanistan, Colonel Robert Morrison. He wrote letters home, talked about the Sentinel, about the operator who never left anyone behind. Sarah felt something twist inside her chest. I remember your father, good man, good soldier. I'm sorry for your loss. He died doing what he believed in, protecting others. Morrison straightened. I joined to honor that, to be like him. This mission, helping you, it feels like continuing his work. Your father would be proud of the man you've become. Morrison blinked, nodded, could not seem to find words. Aldridge cleared his throat, redirected attention back to the maps. Timing is critical. We move at 2200 hours. 3 hours from now, Sarah leads. Morrison provides security. Elena handles technical support and communications. Bull coordinates from command vehicle outside. What about Webb? Sarah asked. If he's compromised, he'll warn the architects. I've sent Webb on a training exercise at the south end of the base. He won't be back until 0300. By then, this will be over. Or we'll be dead, Bull said matter-of-factly. Or that. Aldridge did not try to soften it, did not offer false comfort, just acknowledge the reality. Entry point is here. He tapped in the map. Old maintenance tunnel. Bull helped dig it in 1975. It should take you directly to level 3 of the facility. Should? Elena questioned. The architects may have done renovations, changed the layout. We won't know until you're inside. Weapons? Sarah asked. Whatever you can carry. Suppressed firearms recommended. The facility amplifies sound. Unsuppressed shots will alert everyone. Rules of engagement? Aldridge met her eyes. Officially, you're not there. Unofficially, use whatever force is necessary to complete the mission and get out alive. Sarah nodded. She understood. This was a black operation. Deniable. If it went wrong, Aldridge would claim ignorance. Morrison and Elena would be court-martialed. Sarah and Bull would disappear. And David would die in that underground tomb. One more thing, Aldridge said. His voice dropped, became heavier. If you can't extract David, if the situation becomes untenable, do not let him fall back into architects' hands alive. Do you understand what I'm saying? The room went very still. Morrison looked shocked. Elena's jaw tightened. Bull's expression did not change. He had given that same order to others over decades of service, had maybe even carried it out himself once or twice. Sarah held Aldridge's gaze. I understand. Can you do it, if necessary? If necessary. Sarah's voice was stone. But I'm not planning for necessary. I'm planning to bring him home. Good. Aldridge straightened. Gear up. Final checks. Movement in 2 hours. Questions? No one spoke. There were always questions, but none that had answers that would help. The briefing ended. Morrison and Elena left to prepare. Bull lingered, watching Sarah with concern etched deep in the lines of his face. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I can find another way. There is no other way. Sarah began checking her weapon, field stripping the Glock with practiced efficiency, examining each component. You said so yourself. I was wrong. I should never have asked you. Should never have pulled you back into this. Bull. Sarah looked up at him. David is down there because he was trying to protect something important, because he believed in duty and honor and sacrifice. Same values you taught me. Same values you have lived your entire life. If I walk away now, everything you taught me was a lie. It's not worth your life. Maybe not, but it's worth the try. Bull was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Old, creased, worn from years of being carried. He handed it to Sarah. The photograph showed 3 people. A younger Bull Harrison, hair still dark, standing beside a man in his early 30s. And between them, a boy maybe 10 years old. Dark hair, serious eyes. The boy was David Chen. His father and I, Bull said softly, took that picture in 73. 2 years before David's father died. I promised I'd look after the boy. Promised I'd keep him safe. Spent 40 years trying to keep that promise. You did keep it. You trained him, guided him, made him into someone extraordinary. And then I lost him. Or thought I did. When the reports came in from Syria, when they told me David Chen was KIA, something broke inside me that never healed right. Now I've got a second chance, but I'm sending you into danger to get it. Sending someone else's child into the fire to save mine. Sarah put the photograph down, placed her hand over Bull's weathered one. I'm not a child anymore. Haven't been for a long time. I'm making this choice, not you, me. Why? Why risk everything for a man who lets you think he was dead for 7 years? Because he's my brother. Because you're my father. Because some debts can't be walked away from, no matter how far you run. Sarah squeezed his hand. And because those kids I teach in Montana deserve to grow up in a world where people like the architects don't win. Bull's eyes were wet. He blinked hard, nodded. Your real father would be proud of you, wherever he is. I never knew my real father, but I know you. That's enough. They stood together in the quiet conference room as the sun continued its descent outside. as the base around them prepared for evening. As 300 miles away in Montana, horses moved through a pasture in the fading light, and children dreamed of riding lessons that would not come this week. Sarah finished assembling her weapon, loaded a magazine, chambered a round, safed it. The mechanical actions were meditative, calming. Preparation had always centered her, the rituals of checking gear and planning movements and visualizing success. Elena returned first, changed into black tactical gear, hair still pulled back but now wearing a headset with integrated communications. She carried a tablet and what looked like a portable hacking rig. Young but professional. Ready. Ma'am, Elena said, I've been reviewing facility schematics. There are 17 potential routes to level 5. Most have been collapsed or blocked. The maintenance tunnel Bull mentioned is our best option. Show me. Elena spread the tablet on the table, brought up three-dimensional renderings of the underground complex. Level after level of corridors and rooms and spaces that had been built to survive nuclear war, to protect the chain of command if everything else failed. Here's our entry point. Elena highlighted a section on level 3. From there, we descend through this maintenance shaft to level 4. Intelligence suggests David is being held on level 5 in what used to be the command center. Intelligence from where? Intercepted communications, power usage patterns, guard rotations that someone tried very hard to hide. Elena looked up, met Sarah's eyes. I'm good at my job, ma'am. Probably the best cyber operator on this base. I found things the architects didn't want found. How many hostiles should we expect? Unknown. The facility could hold 50 people comfortably, maybe as many as 100 in crisis conditions, but I don't think they're using anywhere near that. My guess is 20 to 30, enough to maintain security and run operations, but not so many that they draw attention. Morrison arrived, also in tactical black, carrying a suppressed M4 carbine and wearing body armor that looked too heavy for his frame. Young soldiers always overloaded themselves, thought more gear meant more safety. Experience taught you different, taught you that mobility mattered more than armor, that being fast was better than being protected. But Sarah did not correct him, let him learn. If he survived tonight, he would understand. Lieutenant, Sarah said, you've never been in real combat, not like this. No, ma'am. You're going to see things tonight that don't appear in training manuals. You're going to face choices that have no good answers. You're going to learn what your father knew, what Bull knows, what I know, that sometimes doing the right thing means doing terrible things. Morrison swallowed, nodded. I understand. No, you don't, but you will. Sarah checked her watch. 2,100 hours, 1 hour until movement. Listen to me very carefully. When we go in, I lead. You follow exactly 3 steps behind, not 2, not 4, 3. That distance keeps you close enough to support, but far enough that one grenade can't take us both. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. If I give an order, you follow it instantly. No questions, no hesitation. Because the difference between following orders and thinking about following orders is the difference between living and dying. Yes, ma'am. If something happens to me, if I go down, you follow Elena's lead. She becomes your commander. Clear? Ma'am, nothing's going to happen to you. Sarah smiled without warmth. That's what everyone thinks, right up until something happens. Clear? Clear. Good. Sarah turned to Elena. You stay behind Morrison. You're the most valuable asset we have. Without you, we're blind. You do not engage in combat unless absolutely necessary. Your job is to keep us connected and keep us informed. Everything else is secondary. Understood. Bull entered carrying a tactical vest that looked like it had been pulled from storage. Old design, outdated but functional. He was moving better now, adrenaline and purpose overriding the arthritis and the heart condition and the weight of years. Bull, Sarah said, you're supposed to stay in the command vehicle. I am staying in the command vehicle, but I'm driving that vehicle as close to the facility entrance as possible. And I'm monitoring every frequency. If things go sideways, I'm coming in. You can barely climb stairs. Then I'll crawl down them. I'm not sitting in a van 3 miles away while you're in danger. Bull's voice was iron. I'm too old to be the tip of the spear, but I'm not too old to be useful. End of discussion. Sarah knew that tone, knew there was no arguing with it. Fine, but if your heart gives out down there, I'm leaving you behind. Fair enough. Aldridge returned with final updates. Webb hasn't checked in from the training exercise. Can't reach him by radio. The room went still. Sarah and Bull exchanged glances. He's warned them, Sarah said. The architects know we're coming. Possibly. Or he's genuinely out of radio range, or his equipment failed. We don't know. We have to assume the worst. Agreed, which means you're walking into a prepared defense. They'll be ready for you. Morrison looked pale but determined. Elena's jaw was set. Bull's expression was unreadable. Sarah felt something settle inside her. That old, familiar calm that came before violence. That space between normal reality and operational reality, where fear became fuel and doubt became focus. Then we adapt, she said simply. Change the timeline. We go now, right now. Don't give them time to prepare more. Don't give Webb time to coordinate. We move in 15 minutes. Aldridge looked at Bull. Bull nodded. She's right. Speed is our only advantage now. All right. Aldridge moved to the communications equipment. I'll coordinate from here. Bull, take them to the tunnel entrance. Godspeed. They moved quickly. Loading into a dark SUV with tinted windows. Bull driving. Sarah in passenger seat. Morrison and Elena in back. The base passed by outside the windows. Buildings and fences and guard posts. Normal military operations continuing unaware that beneath their feet, something far more dangerous was unfolding. The tunnel entrance was hidden in a maintenance building on the eastern edge of the base. Old, scheduled for demolition next year. Perfect cover for something that was not supposed to exist. Bull parked and they exited quickly, moved through shadows and entered the building through a side door that should have been locked but opened easily. Inside was darkness and the smell of old concrete and rust. Bull produced a flashlight, led them through the building to a floor grate that looked like every other floor grate, except this one had fresh scratches around the edges. Evidence of recent use. Here, Bull said, tunnel goes down 50 feet, then levels off. Follows the old utility corridor directly into the facility. Should put you on level 3 near the maintenance shaft Elena identified. Should, Sarah repeated. Should. They lifted the grate together. Beneath was darkness and a metal ladder descending into nothing. Sarah looked at Morrison and Elena, both young, both scared, both trying not to show it. Last chance to back out, Sarah said. No shame in it. This isn't what you signed up for. I signed up to serve, Morrison said. To protect. This is protecting. I go where my uncle needs me, Elena added. Family doesn't abandon family. Sarah nodded, respected them for it. Then let's go bring our family home. She descended first, hand over hand down the ladder, cold metal against her palms, the flashlight attached to her vest cutting a cone of white light into the darkness below. The tunnel opened into a concrete passage exactly as Bull had described. 7 feet high, 4 feet wide, cables and pipes running along the ceiling. The air was stale but breathable. Morrison came next, then Elena. Bull remained above, looking down at them like a father watching children leave home. Radio check, Bull said into his headset. Copy, Sarah replied. Her voice sounded hollow in the tunnel. Copy, Morrison echoed. Copy, Elena confirmed. I'll be monitoring. Any sign of trouble you call. I'll bring the cavalry. There is no cavalry, Bull. Then I'll be the cavalry. One old man against an army. Should be interesting. He was trying for levity. It did not quite work. Sarah, bring him home. I will. And come home yourself. I'll try. Bull lowered the grate back into place. The sound of metal on metal echoed down the tunnel. Then silence. Then just their breathing and the distant hum of electrical systems and the weight of earth above them. Sarah activated her night vision. The tunnel transformed into shades of green. She moved forward. Morrison 3 steps behind, Elena behind him. They walked in silence. Professional spacing, professional discipline, a team that had never operated together, moving like they had trained for years. The tunnel stretched ahead, 200 yards, 300. The distance longer than the schematics suggested, or maybe it just felt longer knowing what waited at the other end. Sarah counted her breaths, maintained her heart rate, stayed calm. After 10 minutes, they reached a junction. The tunnel split, left and right. Bull's map had not shown a junction. Elena, Sarah whispered. Which way? Elena consulted her tablet, frowned. Neither of these passages should exist. They've expanded the facility. So we guess. Left, power consumption is higher to the left. That's where the activity is. Sarah went left. The tunnel narrowed and became rougher, newer construction, concrete that had been poured recently. This was architects' work. Modifications to the original structure. They moved another 100 yards. Then Sarah stopped, raised her fist, the signal for halt. Behind her, Morrison froze. Elena stopped. Ahead, light, artificial, spilling from a doorway that had been cut into the tunnel wall. Sarah could hear voices, two men talking, casual, relaxed, guards who did not expect trouble. Sarah touched her radio, subvocal whisper. Bull, we have contact. Two hostiles, engaging. Copy. Sarah signaled to Morrison. Two fingers, then pointed. Morrison understood. Two targets. He would take the one on the right. She would take the one on the left. On her signal. They crept forward, slow, silent. The voices became clearer. Young men, talking about a basketball game, about weekend plans, about things that normal people talked about when they were not guarding a torture victim in an underground bunker. Sarah reached the doorway, could see inside. A small room, monitoring station, screens showing camera feeds from throughout the facility. Two soldiers in unmarked fatigues, neither wearing body armor, both carrying sidearms but weapons holstered. Easy targets? Sarah made eye contact with Morrison, counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. They moved together. Sarah entered left. Morrison entered right. Both weapons up. Both targets acquired. Don't move, Sarah said quietly. Both guards spun, reached for weapons, training overriding common sense. Sarah shot the one on the left, suppressed weapon making a sound like a harsh cough. The round took him in the chest. He went down hard. Morrison hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, just long enough for his target to clear leather. Sarah shot that one too. 2 rounds center mass. He collapsed beside the first. Morrison stared at the bodies, at the blood spreading across the floor, at the reality of violence that training never quite prepared you for. First time? Sarah asked. Morrison nodded, could not speak. It doesn't get easier. Anyone who tells you different is lying, but it does become necessary. Remember that. Remember why we're here. To save David. To save everyone David protects by keeping Omega Protocol out of the wrong hands. Elena entered, looked at the bodies, looked at the screens. We have a problem. This monitoring station covers the entire facility. The moment someone checks these feeds, they'll see the guards are down. How long? Guard rotations are every 30 minutes. We have maybe 20 minutes before someone notices. Then we move fast. Sarah studied the screens, counted guards, counted rooms, found what she was looking for on level 5. A small cell, a figure inside. Too grainy to make out features, but the posture was wrong. Slumped, injured. David, there, Sarah pointed. Level 5, southeast corner. That's 3 levels down, Elena said, through multiple checkpoints. Then we go through them. Sarah grabbed one of the guards' radios, attached it to her vest. Might provide warning, might let them hear coordination, might save their lives. They left the monitoring station, moved deeper into the facility, found the maintenance shaft that led down to level 4, a metal staircase, spiral, descending into darkness. Sarah went first, weapon up, each step deliberate, each turn exposing them to potential fire from below. No one shot at them. The stairwell was empty. They reached level 4, another corridor, more modern construction, LED lighting, concrete walls painted institutional gray. This level felt more like a military facility, less like an abandoned relic. They moved through empty hallways, past rooms that had once been offices and storage and living quarters, past evidence that this place was being actively used, coffee cups in a break room, computers humming in what looked like a server room, the detritus of occupation. Sarah's radio crackled, a voice, urgent. Monitoring station not responding, send someone to check. She looked at Morrison and Elena. 20 minutes had become 10. They had 10 minutes before the alarm was raised. Double time, Sarah whispered. Move fast, but stay quiet. They ran, tactical movement, weapons ready, turned a corner and nearly collided with another guard. Young woman, surprised, reaching for her radio. Sarah grabbed her wrist, twisted, threw her against the wall, hard. The woman slumped unconscious. Zip ties, Sarah ordered. Morrison secured the woman's hands and feet, gagged her with her own belt. They kept moving. Found the stairwell to level 5. This one was different. Reinforced door, electronic lock, card reader. Elena pulled out her hacking rig, plugged into the reader, fingers flying across the small keyboard. 30 seconds, she whispered. Sarah watched their back trail, watched for response, for the moment when stealth ended and violence began in earnest. The lock clicked. Elena pulled the door open. We're in. Level 5 was different from the others. Older. Original construction. This was the heart of the facility, the command center, where decisions would have been made if the world ended, where men in uniform would have sat at consoles and coordinated the end of civilization. Now it was a prison. Sarah could feel it, the weight of the place, the darkness that came from using a shelter as a cage. They moved through corridors, checking rooms, clearing spaces, found evidence everywhere. Equipment, supplies, living quarters for at least 20 people. The architects had been here for months, building something, planning something. Sarah's radio crackled again. Different voice. Angry. Monitoring station down. 2 guards dead. Facility breach. All units to alert. Find them. The alarm was raised. Stealth was over. Run, Sarah said. They ran. Full sprint now. No more caution. Just speed. Just the desperate hope that they could reach David before the architects organized a response. Boots pounding on concrete. Breath ragged. Heart rate spiking. They rounded a corner and found what they were looking for. A heavy door. Reinforced. Locked from the outside. A cell. Sarah tried the handle. Locked. No card reader. Just a physical lock. Old school. Elena, can you pick this? Not my skill set. I hack computers, not doors. Morrison stepped forward, raised his M4. I can unlock it. Weapons fire will bring everyone running. They're already running. At least this way we get David out first. Sarah nodded. Do it. Morrison fired 3 rounds into the lock mechanism. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, even with the suppressor. Metal shattered. The door sagged on damaged hinges. Sarah kicked it open. Weapon up. Ready for a trap. Ready for anything except what she saw. David Chen sat chained to a chair in the center of the small room. 35 years old, but looking 50. Face bruised. One eye swollen shut. Blood dried on his shirt, hands secured behind him. Head hanging forward like he did not have the strength to lift it. But alive. Still alive. David, Sarah breathed. His head lifted slowly. The good eye focused on her with difficulty. Recognition came gradually. Disbelief. Then hope. Then something that might have been joy if he had the energy for it. Sarah. His voice was broken, rough. You came. Of course I came. You're my brother. Sarah moved to him, started working on the chains. Bull sent me. We're getting you out. Bull, he's alive. Very much alive, very angry, very determined to get you home. Morrison stood guard at the door. Elena was at her tablet, watching camera feeds, monitoring the response. We have multiple hostiles converging, 3 minutes, maybe less. Work faster, Sarah said. The chains were solid, military grade. Sarah pulled a multi-tool from her vest, started working on the locking mechanism. Her hands were steady, even though her heart was racing. Sarah, David said, the architects. They know about Omega. They know you're the other key holder. I know, Bull told me. There's more, their leader. It's someone you know. Later, first we get you out, then you can brief me. No, you need to know now. David's good eye was fierce, urgent. It's Cartwright, Deputy Director Thomas Cartwright, your instructor from Academy, my instructor. He's running the architects. Sarah's hand stopped. Cartwright, the man who had trained her, who had shaped her understanding of tactics and strategy and leadership, who had been a legend in special operations before retiring 5 years ago. Cartwright is dead, died 3 years ago, faked his death like I did. He's been recruiting, building his organization, and Sarah, he's not doing this because he's evil. He believes he's right, believes the military should control Omega Protocol, believes politicians have betrayed everything we fought for. The chains came loose. David sagged forward. Sarah caught him. He was lighter than he should be, undernourished, injured, but conscious, aware. Can you walk? I can run if I have to. You have to. Sarah helped David stand. Morrison moved to support his other side. Elena was backing toward the door, eyes on her tablet, face tight with concentration. They're 30 seconds out. We need to move now. They exited the cell, started back the way they had come. David between Sarah and Morrison, moving as fast as his damaged body allowed. Elena leading, guiding them through corridors and around corners based on real-time intelligence from the security feeds she had hacked. They made it to the stairwell, started up. David climbing on willpower alone, each step in agony. Sarah could see it in his face, in the way he gritted his teeth and refused to stop. Behind them, voices, shouts, the sound of boots on concrete. The architects were close, too close. They reached level 4, pushed through the door, found themselves facing 6 armed men in tactical gear. Professional. Organized. Weapons already raised. Sarah and Morrison returned fire instantly. The narrow corridor became chaos. Muzzle flashes and the cough of suppressed weapons and the metallic clatter of brass hitting the floor. One hostile went down, then another. But there were too many, too much firepower. Back, Sarah shouted. Back to the stairwell. They retreated, firing as they moved, keeping the hostiles pinned, buying seconds. David stumbled. Morrison caught him, kept him moving. Through the stairwell door, Elena slammed it shut, started working her tablet frantically. I can lock it. Give us maybe 2 minutes. Do it. The lock engaged with an electronic beep. Immediately the door shook as someone hit it from the other side. Then weapons fire, rounds punching through metal. Not enough to breach, but enough to show that 2 minutes might be optimistic. They climbed. Level 3. Sarah's arms burned supporting David's weight. Morrison was flagging under the load of his gear and his share of David's mass. Elena maintained the rear guard, firing occasional shots back down the stairwell to discourage pursuit. The tunnel entrance. Finally, they emerged into the rough-hewn passage. Behind them, the sounds of the door giving way. The sounds of pursuit getting organized and committed. Bull, Sarah transmitted. We have David, coming out hot, multiple hostiles in pursuit. Copy, I'm at the tunnel entrance, hurry. They ran, David between them, his feet barely touching the ground. Morrison and Sarah practically carrying him. Elena behind them, firing controlled bursts whenever the pursuit got too close. The tunnel seemed longer going back, seemed to stretch impossibly. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she did not stop, would not stop. Had not carried David this far to lose him now. Light ahead, the maintenance building, Bull silhouetted against it, old man with a rifle, standing like a monument, like something carved from stone and purpose. They burst from the tunnel, into the building. Bull fired past them, covering their exit, rounds impacting around the tunnel entrance. Buying seconds. Vehicle, Bull shouted, go! They ran for the SUV, piled in. Morrison driving now, Sarah and Elena in back with David. Bull in passenger seat, still firing, still holding the line. Morrison started the engine, threw it in reverse, tires screaming, the maintenance building receding behind them. Figures emerging from it, weapons raised, but not firing, not wanting to attract attention from the rest of the base. They cleared the building. Morrison threw the vehicle into drive, accelerated, navigating base roads at dangerous speeds, heading for the main gate, for escape, for freedom. Sarah looked at David, at the brother she thought she had lost, at the man who had suffered years of torture rather than betray his principles. He was looking back at her with his good eye, and he was smiling, actually smiling. Thank you, he whispered. Thank me when we're safe. We're never safe, but we're together. That's enough. Behind them, the maintenance building was already disappearing into the night. Behind them, the architects were regrouping, planning their next move, preparing for what came next. But ahead was the gate. Ahead was the possibility of escape. Ahead was the thin hope that maybe, just maybe, they had done enough. Morrison slowed as they approached the checkpoint. The same checkpoint where Sarah had arrived that morning. The same Lieutenant Morrison who had mocked her badge, who now drove like his life depended on it, because it did. The gate was open. Aldridge had arranged it, had cleared their exit, had made sure nothing would slow them down. They passed through, out of Fort Bragg, into the North Carolina night, away from the facility and the torture and the darkness. Bull was on his radio, coordinating with Aldridge, making sure the alarm was not raised, making sure this stayed quiet, making sure that officially nothing had happened tonight. Sarah held David as Morrison drove, heading toward a safe house, toward medical attention, toward the beginning of something new or the end of something old. Too soon to tell which. Sarah, David said quietly, it's not over. Cartwright, he's not going to stop. He'll come after us, after Omega Protocol, after everything. I know. We have to stop him. Really stop him. I know. Together, like we always did. Sarah looked out the window at the darkness rushing past, at the world continuing unaware of what they had just done, what they still had to do. Together, she agreed, but first you heal, first you rest, then we finish this. David nodded, let his eye close, let exhaustion take him. Safe for the first time in months. Not free, never truly free when men like Cartwright existed, but alive. And that was enough for now. That was more than enough. The safe house sat 30 miles from Fort Bragg, hidden at the end of a dirt road that wound through pine forest thick enough to swallow sound. An old hunting cabin that General Aldridge had maintained off the books for situations that required discretion. The kind of place where questions were not asked and answers were not given. Dawn was breaking cold and gray when Morrison pulled the SUV into the clearing. Sarah had spent the drive with David's head resting against her shoulder, feeling each labored breath, counting each heartbeat through the pulse at his neck. Alive but damaged. Rescued but not yet safe. Bull emerged from this cabin before the vehicle fully stopped. Behind him came a man Sarah recognized, Dr. James Rodriguez, Elena's father. Retired Army surgeon who had treated more battlefield wounds than most doctors saw in a lifetime. Gray-haired, steady hands, eyes that had seen too much suffering to be surprised by more. They carried David inside, laid him on a table that Dr. Rodriguez had already prepared with medical supplies. Bull stood in the doorway watching. His face was carved from worry and relief in equal measure. Morrison and Elena took up positions at windows. Security, always security. Dr. Rodriguez worked in silence, cutting away David's ruined shirt, examining injuries with gentle efficiency. His daughter stood beside him, assisting without being asked. A family rhythm born from years of working together. Sarah watched from the corner, unable to help, unable to look away. David's torso was a map of violence, bruises in various stages of healing, burns, cuts that had been allowed to close dirty. The methodical work of interrogators who knew how to inflict maximum pain without causing death. 3 broken ribs, Dr. Rodriguez said quietly. Fractured left orbital bone, multiple contusions, signs of electrical burns, dehydration, malnutrition. He looked up at Sarah. He's been through hell. Can you fix him? I can treat him. Fix is a different question. Some of these injuries will heal, others will leave permanent damage. And I can't do anything about what they did to his mind. David's eyes opened. The good one focused on the doctor. My mind is fine. Just patch the body so I can finish this. You need rest, weeks of it, maybe months. Don't have weeks. The architects know we have David. They'll accelerate whatever they're planning. Dr. Rodriguez began cleaning wounds, setting up an IV line. Then you better talk fast, because in about 5 minutes I'm giving you something for the pain that will put you out for 12 hours. David looked at Sarah, at Bull, at Morrison and Elena. Gather around, you all need to hear this. They moved closer, formed a circle around the table, like warriors around a campfire, like soldiers receiving final orders before an impossible mission. Thomas Cartwright, David began. His voice was rough but clear. You remember him, Sarah, our instructor, the man who taught us everything about tactics and strategy, the legend. Sarah remembered. Cartwright had been larger than life. A Vietnam veteran with more decorations than most generals. A man who could shoot, fight, lead, inspire. Who made you believe that serving was the highest calling, that protecting the innocent was worth any sacrifice. He recruited me 8 years ago, David continued. After Syria, after my supposed death. He approached me in Romania, told me he knew I was alive, told me he knew about the staged death, offered me a choice. Join him or die for real, Bull said. Join him or watch everyone I cared about die. Starting with you, Bull, then Sarah, then everyone else who mattered. David winced as the doctor worked. So I joined, went underground, became part of the architects, spent years learning their operation, their goals, their methods. What do they want? Morrison asked. Control, not of government, of the systems that protect government. Omega Protocol is the crown jewel. With it, they can override any command structure, can authorize or prevent nuclear launches, can shut down communications, can essentially hold the entire military apparatus hostage. Why, Elena pressed, why would decorated officers want to destroy the system they served? They don't see it as destruction. They see it as restoration. David's voice carried weight, the weight of years spent among believers. Cartwright and his followers think politicians have corrupted everything. Think rules of engagement get soldiers killed. Think oversight and accountability are chains that prevent the military from doing what's necessary. So they want to take the chains off, Sarah said. They want to burn the chains entirely. Replace civilian oversight with military control. Use Omega Protocol to force the issue. threaten nuclear action unless the government accedes to their demands. The room was silent, the magnitude of it settling over everyone. Not just a rogue operation, not just theft of classified information. A coup. A fundamental overthrow of the constitutional order that had endured for more than 2 centuries. How many? Bull asked. How many architects are there? Started with 12, Cartwright's inner circle, all retired officers, all disillusioned, all believing they're patriots, saving the country from itself. David closed his eye. Now there are more active duty personnel, support staff, true believers, and opportunists. Maybe 80 people total, maybe more. I stopped counting. And their timeline was 3 months. That was before you extracted me. Now it's accelerated. Cartwright knows we're coming, knows we'll try to stop him. He'll move fast. Dr. Rodriguez finished his preliminary treatment, hung a second IV bag. That's all I can do for now. He needs rest, needs proper medical facility, but he'll live. How long before I can move? David asked. You shouldn't move for weeks. How long before I can move? The doctor sighed. Tomorrow, maybe, if you're willing to accept permanent damage and potential death from complications. I'll take that risk. I know you will. You special operations types always do. De Rodriguez packed his supplies. Elena, help me clean up. Father and daughter moved to the kitchen, leaving the operators alone. Bull lowered himself into a chair, agent exhaustion catching up. We need a plan. Can't just react. Can't just defend. We need to take the fight to Cartwright. Agreed, Sarah said, but we need to know where he is. David, do you know their headquarters? They move, never stay in one place long, but I know their next meeting location. David grimaced. They're gathering in 3 days. Full council, all the key players, making final plans for their operation. Where? The old Cold War command bunker? Not the one at Fort Bragg. The real one. The one that was supposed to survive nuclear war deep in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia, Raven Rock. Bull's face went pale. The alternate National Military Command Center. I thought that was still active. The public areas are, but there are levels below that were sealed in the 80s. Cartwright has access, has been preparing them for months. That's where they'll be, all of them, 3 days from now. Then that's where we go, Sarah said. That's suicide, Morrison interjected. We're 5 people, maybe 6 if Dr. Rodriguez helps, against 80 trained operators in a fortified underground facility. 7 people, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. General Marcus Aldridge stood there, still in uniform, face lined with stress. I'm coming with you. Sir, Elena said, you can't. If this goes wrong, if we fail, the Army needs you in position to manage the fallout. If this goes wrong, there won't be an Army to manage. Cartwright and the architects will control everything. Better I'm with you trying to stop it than sitting at Fort Bragg waiting for the world to end. Bull stood, moved to his old friend. They had served together for 40 years, had fought wars and trained soldiers and made decisions that shaped history. Marcus, you have a wife, grandchildren. You don't need to be on the front line anymore. Neither do you. But here you are. Aldridge's voice was firm. We all have families. We all have lives we'd rather be living. But this is bigger than comfort, bigger than safety. This is about preventing something catastrophic. Sarah studied the general, saw the determination, saw the same quality that made Bull who he was, the quality that made old soldiers continue fighting long after they had earned rest. All right, she said, 7 of us, against 80 of them, in their fortress, with 3 days to plan. Anyone have any good ideas? Silence. Then Morrison spoke. My father used to say that the best way to take a fortress is to be invited inside. Everyone looked at him, the young lieutenant who had been a checkpoint guard yesterday, who had killed for the first time last night, who was now proposing strategy to people with decades more experience. Go on, Sarah said. The architects think they have David. Don't know we extracted him. What if we let them think they still have him? What if we give them what they want? You're suggesting we hand David back to them? Elena sounded incredulous. I'm suggesting we make them think we are. Set up an exchange, David for something they want. Get inside their perimeter, then hit them when they're not expecting it. Bull nodded slowly. It could work. Cartwright knows Sarah, knows she'd do anything to protect David, might believe she'd negotiate. It's risky, David said. If they realize it's a trap, everyone dies. We're going to die anyway if we try a frontal assault, Morrison countered. This gives us a chance. Sarah turned to David. Can you contact them? Reach out to Cartwright directly? I had a phone, emergency contact. They took it when they captured me. I have the number, Bull said. Everyone looked at him. What? I'm thorough. When I was investigating David's messages, I traced the communication chain, found the phone number he used, been sitting on it, waiting for the right time to use it. This is the right time, Sarah said. We call Cartwright. Tell him we want to negotiate. Tell him we're willing to trade David and information about Omega Protocol in exchange for amnesty. Get him to agree to a meeting. He won't believe it, David said. He'll want to believe it. That's different. Sarah's voice was cold, calculated. Cartwright thinks he's the smartest person in any room, thinks everyone else is naive, thinks Sarah Mitchell is just a soldier who follows orders. He'll believe I'm scared enough to negotiate, believe I'm desperate enough to trade. And when we get inside, Aldridge asked, we destroy everything, their command structure, their support systems, their ability to move forward with this coup, and we capture Cartwright, bring him to justice. Or kill him, Bull added quietly. Or that. Dr. Rodriguez returned from the kitchen. I'm not military, never was. But I've seen what happens when good people do nothing. I'll help however I can. You're a doctor, his daughter said. You save lives. And sometimes the way you save lives is by stopping the people who threaten them. Rodriguez looked at the group. You're going to need medical support, field treatment, someone who can patch you up if this goes sideways. That's me. Sarah felt something shift. This was not just a team anymore. This was family, blood and chosen, all willing to risk everything for the same cause. 3 days, she said. We plan, we prepare, we train as a unit, then we go into Raven Rock and we end this. Those 3 days passed like water through fingers, too fast and too slow at the same time. They converted the hunting cabin into a tactical operations center. Maps covered every wall, intelligence briefs scattered across tables, weapons cleaned and recleaned, plans made and revised and made again. David healed slowly. De Rodriguez kept him doped on painkillers and antibiotics, kept changing dressings and monitoring vitals. The younger man's body was responding, bruises fading from purple to yellow, swelling reducing, ribs knitting, but the damage went deeper than flesh. Sarah watched him wake screaming the first night, watched him fight invisible enemies, watched Bull hold him like a father holding a son until the terror passed. PTSD, Dr. Rodriguez diagnosed. Torture leaves scars you can't see, can't treat. Only time and therapy help. And even then, not always. But David pushed through, used pain as motivation, used anger as fuel. The second day he was walking. The third day he was moving through tactical drills with Sarah. Slow but functional. Damaged but determined. Morrison trained harder than anyone, running, shooting, hand-to-hand combat, trying to prepare for violence that could not be prepared for, trying to be worthy of his father's memory. Sarah worked with him, taught him things that were not in manuals, how to move through doors, how to clear rooms, how to make the hard choices when there was no time to think. You're a natural, she told him on the second day. Your father would be proud. My father died because he hesitated, because he thought there was always another option, always another way. Morrison's voice was tight. I won't make that mistake. Your father died because he was brave, because he went into danger to protect others. That's not a mistake. That's heroism. Elena spent her time with technology, hacking into systems, building back doors, creating digital weapons that could disable security and communications. Her father watched her work with pride and concern in equal measure. She's brilliant, Dr. Rodriguez told Sarah. Always has been. But brilliance doesn't stop bullets. No, it doesn't, but it might prevent us from getting shot at in the first place. Bull and Aldridge planned strategy. Two old warriors who had seen more combat than everyone else combined. They argued over approach vectors and fallback positions, over rules of engagement and acceptable losses, over the cost of victory and the price of failure. Sarah listened to them debate, remembered that these men had shaped her, that everything she knew about leadership and sacrifice came from their example, that if she died in 3 days, she would die trying to live up to their standard. On the third night, David found her outside. The moon was full, the forest around the cabin alive with night sounds, crickets and owls, and the distant howl of coyotes. Can't sleep? He asked. Never could before in operation. Me neither. He lowered himself carefully onto the porch step beside her. Sarah, If this goes bad, if I don't make it, I need you to know something. Don't talk like that. Someone has to. We're walking into hell tomorrow. Odds are at least some of us don't walk out. His voice was steady. I let you think I was dead for 7 years. Let you carry guilt that wasn't yours to carry. Let you blame yourself for something I chose. Why? Why fake your death and not tell me? Because I loved you, not romantically, but as family, as the sister I never had. And Cartwright threatened you, said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't help him build his organization, he'd kill you, make it look like an accident. And I couldn't let that happen. Sarah felt tears burning. Did not let them fall. You should have told me. We could have faced him together. Maybe. Or maybe we'd both be dead. I made the choice I thought I had to make. Spent 7 years undercover, 7 years gathering evidence, 7 years trying to build a case strong enough to bring him down. He looked at the moon. Now we're out of time, out of options. This is the end game. Then we make it count. We stop Cartwright. We protect Omega Protocol. We make sure your 7 years meant something. Our 7 years, you spent them in exile, teaching children, building peace. That meant something too. They sat in silence, brother and sister, damaged and dangerous and determined. Somewhere inside the cabin, Bull was sleeping fitfully. Dr. Rodriguez was checking supplies. Morrison was cleaning his rifle for the 10th time. Elena was writing code that might save their lives or condemn them. A family of warriors preparing for war. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. They loaded equipment into 2 vehicles, the SUV and a cargo van that Aldridge had requisitioned. Weapons, medical supplies, explosives, communications gear, everything they might need and most things they would not. Bull made the phone call at 0800 hours. Used the number David had provided. The call was answered on the second ring. Yes, male voice, calm, controlled. Cartwright. This is Colonel William Harrison, retired. I believe you know who I am. I do, and I know you have something that belongs to me. David Chen belongs to himself, not to you, not to anyone. Philosophical debates aside, I assume you're calling to negotiate his return. I'm calling to negotiate terms. David is injured, in bad shape. He needs medical treatment you can't provide. And in exchange for that treatment, for his safety, we're prepared to discuss arrangements. Silence on the line. Cartwright processing, calculating. What kind of arrangements? Face to face, you and me, plus whoever you want to bring. We'll bring our people. Neutral ground. We talk about what happens next. And if I refuse, then we go public. Release everything David collected over 7 years. Every name, every operation, every crime. The Architects become the most wanted organization in America overnight. More silence. Longer this time. You're bluffing. David was captured before he could consolidate his intelligence. Then call the bluff. Say no. See what happens. Bull's voice was iron. Decades of command authority concentrated into every word. Sarah watched him perform, watched him play the role of desperate officer trying to negotiate peace, watched him sell the lie. 3 days, Cartwright said finally. Raven Rock Facility, Level 7, the old command center. Bring David, bring Sarah Mitchell, bring whoever else you trust. We'll talk. How do we know you won't just kill us the moment we arrive? Because I want what you have more than I want you dead. Information, access codes, understanding of how Omega Protocol was built. David has some of that. Sarah has the rest. Kill you and I get nothing. Talk to you and maybe we reach an understanding. An understanding? I'm not a monster, Colonel. I'm a patriot trying to save this country from itself. If you and your people can be convinced of that, if you can see the righteousness of our cause, perhaps we can work together rather than against each other. Bull looked at Sarah. She nodded. They had him. Cartwright's ego had taken the bait. 3 days. Raven Rock. We'll be there. Colonel Harrison, one more thing. If you're planning some kind of heroic assault, if you think you can storm our facility and rescue anyone, I encourage you to reconsider. We have enough firepower down here to fight a small war. And we will. Understood. See you soon. The line went dead. Bull set the phone down, looked at the others. He bought it. We're in. He suspects something, David said. Cartwright's not stupid. He'll prepare for betrayal. Let him prepare. We're not coming to negotiate. Sarah picked up her go-bag. We're coming to end this, permanently. They drove north. 2 vehicles, 7 people, through North Carolina into Virginia, through mountains that had sheltered armies and secrets for centuries. the Blue Ridge rising around them, Appalachia spreading endlessly in every direction. Raven Rock was not on any civilian maps. 600 acres of secure facility buried inside a mountain. The Pentagon's insurance policy, where government would relocate if Washington was destroyed, where commands would be issued if everything else failed. Most of it was still active, still manned, still operational. But the lower levels, the ones built during the height of Cold War paranoia, those had been decommissioned, sealed, forgotten. Except they had not been forgotten. Cartwright had remembered, had accessed them, had turned them into his headquarters. They parked 5 miles from the facility entrance, hiked through forest-carrying equipment. It was noon when they reached the perimeter, fence line that extended for miles. Guard towers, motion sensors, every security measure modern military could devise. But Cartwright had told them to come, had given them access codes, had opened the door to his fortress because his ego demanded he try to convert them, demanded he prove his righteousness, demanded he make them understand. Sarah stood at the access gate, small entrance, unmarked. Could have been maintenance access to a utility station. But behind it lay corridors that descended hundreds of feet, lay the heart of something dark and dangerous. Last chance to turn back, she said. Last chance to choose safety over duty. No one's turning back, Morrison said. The young lieutenant had aged years and days. We're with you to the end. All of us, Elena confirmed. Dr. Rodriguez just nodded, too practical for speeches. Bull and Aldridge stood together, 2 old soldiers at the end of their road. We've been in worse situations, Bull said. Name one, Aldridge replied. Give me time. David stepped forwards, still moving carefully, still in pain, but functional, determined. Cartwright thinks he's invincible, thinks he's thought of everything, but he has a weakness. Which is, Sarah asked? He needs to be right, needs to prove his point, needs to make everyone acknowledge his genius. That need will make him hesitate, will make him explain when he should be shooting, will give us the opening we need. Sarah looked at her team, her family, saw courage and fear in equal measure, saw people who would rather die than let evil win, who would rather fight than surrender, who embodied everything the military was supposed to represent: honor, duty, sacrifice. Then let's give him the audience he wants, she said. And when he's done talking, when he's done trying to convince us, we remind him why the Sentinel was a name that made people afraid. She entered the access code Cartwright had provided. The gate clicked open. Beyond it lay darkness and descending stairs. Lay the path to confrontation. Lay the place where everything would be decided. Sarah Mitchell took the first step down. Behind her came Morrison, then Elena, then David and Dr. Rodriguez, then Bull and Aldridge, 7 people descending into darkness to stop 80, 7 people carrying the weight of honor against the force of misguided conviction. The stairs went down forever, level after level, past sealed doors and warning signs, past emergency lighting that barely pushed back shadow, down into the mountain, down into the earth, down to where Cartwright waited. At the bottom was a massive door, blast-proof, radiation sealed, designed to protect the military command from nuclear fire, now protecting something far more dangerous. Sarah stopped before it. The others gathered behind her. This was the moment, the threshold. Beyond this door lay violence and truth in equal measure. Lay the chance to stop a coup. Lay the possibility of death. Ready? She asked. Ready, they answered. All of them, together. Sarah knocked on the door. 3 times. Measured. Controlled. The sound echoed in the stairwell, echoed in the confined space, echoed like a challenge, like a declaration of war. The door opened slowly, hydraulics engaging with mechanical precision. Light spilled from beyond, harsh, fluorescent, revealing a corridor lined with armed personnel, 24 soldiers in tactical gear. Weapons ready, faces hidden behind masks. And at the far end, standing in the doorway to what must be the command center, stood Thomas Cartwright. 62 years old, still broad-shouldered, still powerful, hair gone white but eyes sharp as ever, wearing fatigues without insignia, a soldier without rank because he had transcended rank. Sarah Mitchell, he said. His voice carried down the corridor, filled the space. The Sentinel, and Colonel Harrison and my prodigal student David Chen. Welcome, welcome to the future. Sarah stepped forward, into the light, into the corridor, into the presence of the man who had taught her everything and learned nothing. "Hello, Cartwright," and she said, "We need to talk." "Indeed we do," he smiled, confident, assured, certain of his righteousness. "Indeed we do. Come, let me show you what we're building. Let me show you why everything you believe is wrong. Let me show you the truth." He turned and walked into the command center, expecting them to follow, expecting them to see his vision, expecting them to understand. Sarah followed. Followed not because she would be convinced, but because she needed to be close, needed to be inside, needed to be in position when the moment came, when talk ended and action began. When the Sentinel reminded everyone why that name had once meant something, the command center opened before them, vast, filled with equipment and personnel, screens showing maps and data streams, the beating heart of the architect's operation. And Sarah understood that this was bigger than she had imagined, more organized, more dangerous, more committed to a vision that would destroy everything she had sworn to protect. But she also understood something Cartwright did not, that she had not come to talk, that she had come to finish what David started 7 years ago, that the architect's time was ending. Tonight, the command center was a cathedral to military power, 30 feet high, 100 feet wide. The ceiling arched overhead like the vault of some ancient fortress built to withstand the end of the world. Walls lined with screens showing satellite feeds and troop movements in data streams that pulsed like digital heartbeats. Weather patterns across continents. Nuclear arsenal locations marked in clusters of red. Communication relay stations forming webs of connection. The nervous system of American defense laid bare for anyone with eyes to see. 24 operators sat at consoles wearing headsets, speaking in low voices, coordinating something vast and terrible. Each one focused, professional, fingers dancing across keyboards, eyes scanning multiple monitors, believing in their mission with the certainty of the converted. Young men and women who had chosen to follow Cartwright into treason because they believed it was patriotism, because they believed the system was broken beyond repair, because they had been convinced that only radical action could save what they loved. Thomas Cartwright stood at the center of it all, arms spread like a preacher welcoming congregation, like a general surveying his army before battle, like a man who believed absolutely in his own righteousness and could not conceive of being wrong. 62 years old, but still powerful, still broad-shouldered and straight-backed, still commanding presence that filled a room without effort. The kind of leader that men followed into darkness because they believed he could see the light on the other side. The kind of officer who inspired loyalty that transcended reason. His hair had gone white over the years, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating, missing nothing. He wore fatigues without insignia or rank, no longer needing the trappings of authority because authority radiated from him naturally, from decades of command, from years of making life and death decisions, from the absolute certainty that he alone understood what needed to be done. Impressive, isn't it? His voice carried across the space. Deep, resonant, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. This is what we've built while the politicians argued, while the bureaucrats delayed, while good soldiers died following rules written by people who never wore the uniform, never stood in the line of fire, never had to make the hard choices. Sarah stepped fully into the room. Behind her came the others. Morrison with his rifle held at low ready, Elena with her tablet clutched against her chest, David moving carefully, each step an effort against pain and exhaustion. Dada Rodriguez, looking overwhelmed by the scale of what he was seeing. Bull and Aldridge flanking the group, 2 old warriors protecting their people one final time. 7 people surrounded by 80. 7 people in the heart of enemy territory. 7 people who had walked voluntarily into a trap because sometimes the only way to spring a trap was from the inside. Cartwright's soldiers formed a loose perimeter around the command center. Not threatening, not yet, but ready. Hands near weapons, eyes watchful. Professional operators who would kill on command without hesitation. Men and women who had trained for years, who knew violence intimately, who believed in their cause enough to die for it and kill for it in equal measure. The air was thick with tension, with the weight of impending action, with the knowledge that words would only take them so far and then weapons would speak the rest. Every person in the room understood this. Every person was preparing for it. The only question was who would move first and how many would survive the aftermath. "You taught me tactics," Sarah said, her voice steady, controlled, giving nothing away. taught me to read terrain and assess threats, taught me that the best position is the one your enemy doesn't understand until it's too late, taught me that victory goes not to the strongest, but to the smartest. I taught you well. Cartwright smiled, genuine warmth in the expression, pride even. But I also taught you to recognize when you're outmatched. 7 against 80, in my facility, on my terms, with every advantage on my side. There's no tactical advantage here, Sarah. No clever maneuver that will change the mathematics of force. You came because you wanted to talk. So let's talk. He gestured to a conference table near the center of the room. Chairs arranged in careful order. Coffee service prepared with institutional precision. Water pitchers, glasses. The civilized trappings of negotiation laid over the reality of armed confrontation. The illusion of diplomacy over the truth of violence waiting to be born. Bull moved first, limping slightly, making a show of his age and limitations, each step measured, calculated. The performance of a man who wanted his opponent to underestimate him. He lowered himself into a chair with visible effort, grimacing, favoring his left side, breathing hard like the exertion had cost him, playing the role of the broken old man, the warrior past his prime. Aldridge followed, moved to Bull's right, sat with military precision despite the years, watched everything, cataloged every person, every weapon, every exit. The general who had spent 40 years making contingency plans now making one more, possibly the last one he would ever need. Then David, moving carefully, still bandaged from his torture, still carrying the marks of 3 months in architect's hands. But his eyes were clear, focused. The ghost was present. The operator who had spent 7 years undercover was ready for the final act, ready to see his long mission through to its end. Then Sarah sat across from Cartwright, met his eyes without flinching. 2 students of war facing each other, teacher and pupil, mentor and protege, all of it about to burn in the fire of conflicting convictions. Morrison and Elena remained standing, flanking the seated group, Morrison with his weapon, Elena with her tablet already working, fingers moving in subtle patterns across the screen, preparing the digital assault that would come. Rodriguez hovered near the medical gear he had brought, ready to save lives or bear witness to their ending. Cartwright sat across from them. 2 of his lieutenants flanked him, hard men with harder eyes, veterans who had seen combat in places that did not appear on official records, who had done things that were never spoken of, who believed in Cartwright's vision with the fervor of converts, true believers who would die before they surrendered. "Let me tell you a story," Cartwright began, his voice dropping, becoming intimate, sharing. Persian Gulf, 1991. Operation Desert Storm. I was 45 years old, seasoned officer, 2 decades of service behind me, leading good men into hostile territory with orders that changed every 6 hours. He paused. Let the memory settle. Let them see him remembering. We'd identified targets, high-value assets, enemy command posts, supply depots. We'd plan our approach, brief our teams, move into position, and then orders would come down to pull back, wait for clearance from Washington. Let the diplomats negotiate. Let the enemy regroup and reinforce. Do it all over again next week. The bitterness in his voice was real, old wounds that had never healed. We weren't allowed to finish the job, weren't allowed to leverage our advantages. Politicians wouldn't let us. Rules of engagement tied our hands. Got men killed, men I trained, men I cared about, men whose families I had to visit afterwards and explain why their sons and husbands and fathers died because some bureaucrat in Washington was afraid of bad publicity. War requires discipline, Bull said quietly, his voice measured, reasonable. Everyone who serves learns that following orders is what separates soldiers from armed mobs. But discipline shouldn't mean suicide, shouldn't mean hamstringing warriors with bureaucratic nonsense that serves politics instead of victory. Cartwright leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. I spent 30 years watching good soldiers die because politicians played games with military operations. Watched oversight become obstruction. Watched accountability become excuse-making. Watched the chain of command become a chain around our necks, strangling initiative and common sense. He stood, moved to one of the large screens, brought up images, combat footage, Politicians in suits, meeting rooms where men in uniform sat silent while civilians made decisions. This is what broke the military, not enemy action, not insufficient funding, but the slow poison of political interference, the constant undermining of command authority, the endless second-guessing by people who never faced fire. Cartwright turned back to them. The architects are going to change that, going to restore what was lost, going to remember that the military exists to win wars, not to participate in endless bureaucratic theater. By holding the country hostage? Sarah asked, her voice flat, challenging. By threatening nuclear action unless the government surrenders control to you? That's not restoration. That's a coup, call it what it is. By restoring the natural order. Cartwright's voice remained calm, patient, like explaining something simple to a child. Military power protecting civilian leadership instead of being micromanaged by it. We're not trying to rule, we're trying to free the military to do what it does best. To defend, to deter, to destroy enemies before they destroy us. Kill people, Morrison spoke for the first time. His voice was tight, angry, barely controlled. My father died following your kind of rules. Died believing in honor and duty in the chain of command. Died thinking he was protecting something worth protecting. You're spitting on his memory, on every soldier who ever believed in something larger than themselves. Cartwright's eyes fixed on the young lieutenant, really saw him for the first time. Your father was Robert Morrison. I remember him. Good man, strong soldier, served with him briefly in the Middle East. Somalia, Bosnia, places where politicians sent us without clear objectives or sufficient support. He died because politicians wouldn't let him properly engage the enemy. Died because rules of engagement got in the way of victory. Don't you want to prevent that? Don't you want future soldiers to have a fighting chance? I want them to fight for something worth dying for. Not for your ego, not for your vision of how the world should work. Morrison's finger was near his trigger. Not on it, but near. I want them to serve a country that's worth serving, a constitution that means something, principles that transcend any one person's grievances. Tensions spiked in the room. Cartwright's soldiers shifted. Hands moved closer to weapons, safeties being thumbed off, positions being adjusted. The operators around the console stopped their work, turned to watch, ready to act if their leader commanded it. But Cartwright raised a hand. Peace. Not yet. Passion, he said, voice softening, almost sad. I remember having that, before years of watching good people die for bad reasons burned it out. Before compromise and politics and endless bureaucracy taught me that passion without power is just noise. He turned to Sarah. You understand, I know you do. I taught you, shaped you, saw your potential, and helped you realize it. How many operations did you run that were compromised by political considerations? How many times did you have the shot and weren't allowed to take it? How many times did bureaucracy cost lives that should have been saved? Sarah met his eyes, saw the true believer there, saw the man who had started with legitimate grievances and let them curdle into something toxic. Let them transform from frustration into fanaticism, from concern into conviction that justified anything. I understand frustration. I understand anger at waste and stupidity and the endless friction between military necessity and political reality. Every operator understands that. Every soldier who ever served under impossible constraints understands that. She stood, moved around the table, closing distance. But the answer isn't to overthrow the system, isn't to replace civilian oversight with military dictatorship. The answer is to work within it, to be better than the worst parts, to prove through excellence that we deserve the trust placed in us. Noble sentiment. Cartwright's voice held genuine respect. Also naive. The system is broken, Sarah. Irredeemably broken. Corrupted beyond repair by decades of political cowardice and bureaucratic self-interest. An Omega protocol is the tool to fix it, the lever that can move the world. That's why I need you and David, need you to help us access it, need you to be part of the solution instead of defending a dying status quo. We'll never give you the codes, David said. His voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion. You can torture me for another 7 years. You can do to Sarah what you did to me. Won't matter. Omega requires willing participation, requires conscious choice, Requires two people making the decision freely. You can't force it, can't fake it, can't trick the system. We built it specifically to resist coercion. I know. Cartwright acknowledged the truth without anger. Moved to one of the large screens. Brought up a map. The United States spread across the display, red dots scattered throughout in clusters, concentrated in places. These are our assets, operators in every major base, sympathizers in every command structure, personnel who agree that change is necessary, that the old way is failing. He manipulated the display, brought up percentages, statistics, evidence of infiltration. 30% of current military command agrees with us, actively supports our goals. Another 40% is undecided, waiting to see who wins. Only 30% actively opposes what we're doing. We're not a fringe group. We're a movement, a revolution from within. He let that sink in, let them see the scope of what they faced. And in 72 hours, we're going to make our move, with or without Omega Protocol, with or without your cooperation. The only question is how many people die unnecessarily, how much chaos happens during the transition, how much blood gets spilled that doesn't need to be spilled. Meaning? Aldridge asked, his general's voice, command tone, demanding clarity and receiving it. Meaning if you help us, we can make this transition smooth, bloodless, a quiet shift in authority that most people won't even notice until it's over and done. But if you force us to do this the hard way, there will be casualties. Military and civilian, blood on everyone's hands, cities burning, supply chains collapsing. Everything that happens when order breaks down. You're threatening civil war, Bull said flatly. No inflection, just statement of fact. I'm promising restoration. There's a difference. Civil war implies two sides fighting for control. This is one side taking control while the other side collapses from its own corruption and incompetence. Not from where I'm sitting. Cartwright returned to the table, sat, steepled his fingers. The patient teacher. Colonel Harrison, you're what? 68? Nearly 70? Fought in how many conflicts? Korea? No, too young. But certainly the Cold War. Certainly the brush wars of the 80s and 90s. Certainly you've lost count of how many men you've trained and then buried. And what do you have to show for it? What does your service buy you? He answered his own question. A modest pension that barely covers your medical bills. A government that forgot you the moment you retired. Politicians who use veterans as props during campaigns and ignore them afterwards. Don't you want better for the next generation? Don't you want Morrison and soldiers like him to serve something that actually values their sacrifice? I want them to live in a country that respects the Constitution. Bull's voice was iron, unshakable. That values civilian oversight of the military. That doesn't let generals decide they know better than democracy. That remembers that we serve the people, not the other way around. That's what I've fought for. That's what your coup would destroy. Democracy failed us, failed every soldier who ever wore the uniform and believed the oath meant something. Democracy is messy, slow, frustrating as hell, full of compromise and half measures and political theater. Bull leaned forward despite his act of weakness, but it's ours. It's what makes us different from every dictatorship and authoritarian regime we've ever fought against. And it's worth protecting, even from people who think they're saving it. The conversation was going nowhere. Sarah could see it, could feel it. Cartwright was committed, had crossed too many lines to turn back. Bull was immovable, had spent 70 years building principles he would not abandon. They would talk in circles forever. And while they talked, more architects were moving into position. More assets were being deployed. More preparations were being made for the coup that would tear the country apart. She caught Morrison's eye, gave the slightest nod. The young lieutenant understood, began shifting his weight, preparing, getting ready for the violence that was coming. Elena's fingers moved subtly across her tablet, entering commands, preparing her digital assault, getting ready to blind and confuse and divide the enemy forces. Sarah thought about the package that had arrived at her ranch 2 weeks ago, the old Omega badge with the note attached. They know, only you can stop it. Signed Ghost in David's distinctive handwriting. Except it was not David's handwriting, was Bull's imitation of it. Bull had admitted as much during the long drive from Montana, had confessed he used David's old call sign to get her attention, to make her understand the stakes without saying them plainly over channels that might be monitored. It had worked. She was here. They were all here, ready to finish what David started 7 years ago. And Sergeant Marcus Webb, the traitor who had discovered their approach, was not here. Was currently secured at Fort Bragg under Aldridge's most trusted guards, interrogated by people who knew how to extract information without breaking regulations. Broken but not damaged, providing intelligence about Architect's operations. His betrayal had been turned into an asset. His warnings had been intercepted and controlled, had given them the timeline they needed, had allowed them to prepare. Webb had been blackmailed, his daughter's safety threatened if he did not cooperate. Once Aldridge's people secured the girl, Webb had flipped instantly, had become cooperative, had provided names and locations and schedules. Everything they needed to turn this operation from suicide into merely desperate. Cartwright, Sarah said, drew his attention back to her, away from Bull. You were a great teacher, taught me everything about being a soldier, about tactics and strategy and leadership, about what it means to be responsible for others' lives. But you forgot the most important lesson, or maybe you never learned it in the first place. Which is? Genuine curiosity in his voice. The teacher wanting to know what the student thought he missed. That soldiers serve something larger than themselves, serve an ideal, a principle, a vision of what should be rather than what is, not a person, not a leader, not even themselves. She stood slowly, deliberately. You've made this about your vision, your grievance, your solution. You've become the thing you claim to fight against. A dictator who thinks he knows better than everyone else. That's not service. That's tyranny dressed in patriotic language. Cartwright's expression hardened, the warmth leaving, being replaced by something colder, more dangerous. Careful, Sarah. You're my student, my protege. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you force me to. Or what? You'll kill us. She moved around the table, toward him, closing distance with each word. We came here knowing that was likely, came prepared for it, came ready to die him if that's what stopping you required. But you made a mistake. The same mistake every tyrant makes. You let us inside. Let us see your operation. Let us close enough to hurt you because your ego demanded you try to convince us. Demanded you prove you were right. You're surrounded, outgunned, outmanned. There's no scenario where you walk out of here alive unless I allow it. I don't need to walk out. I just need to stop you. Understanding dawned in Cartwright's eyes. Too late. Always too late when pride blinded you to reality. You didn't come to negotiate. This whole thing was a ruse. No, we came to finish this. Sarah moved, fast as thought. Years of training overriding conscious thought. Grabbed Cartwright, pulled him close, used him as a shield. Her sidearm appeared from concealment at the small of her back, pressed against his temple. Hard enough to hurt, hard enough to make the point absolutely clear. The room erupted, soldiers raising weapons, shouts of alarm, commands being barked. But no one fired, could not fire without hitting Cartwright, without killing the man they followed, the man whose vision justified everything. Morrison's rifle swung up, covering the nearest threats. Smooth transition, professional. His father would have recognized the movement, would have been proud. Elena's tablet sent the signal she had been preparing, the signal that had been waiting for this exact moment. Every screen in the command center went dark. Simultaneously, complete blackout. Emergency lighting kicked in a heartbeat later. Red, pulsing, the room transformed from controlled operations center to emergency situation, from order to chaos in the span of seconds. Bull and Aldridge moved with speed that belied their age. Decades of combat training taking over. Muscle memory and practice overwhelming the limitations of aging bodies. Bull tackled the nearest soldier, took him down hard. Aldridge grabbed a weapon from a console operator who was too stunned to resist. Two old warriors proving they still had fight left. David, injured and slow, still managed to move. Tripped another guard, grabbed a fallen weapon. The ghost was present. The operator was functional. The man who had survived 7 years undercover was ready for the endgame. Stand down, Cartwright shouted, authority in his voice. Command, everyone stand down now. But it was too late. The moment had broken, violence had been invited, and violence always accepted the invitation. Always came when called, always demanded its price in blood and pain and consequences that could not be undone. Morrison fired. Controlled bursts, 3-round patterns. taking out lights and equipment, not aiming at people yet, not committing to lethal force, just creating more chaos, more darkness, more confusion, making it harder for Cartwright's people to coordinate, to respond, to mount an effective defense. Elena was at a backup console, fingers flying, moving faster than thought, overriding security systems with access code she had stolen over the past 3 days, locking doors, sealing sections, trapping Cartwright's forces in isolated pockets, dividing them, making 80 into 10 groups of 8, making the impossible merely difficult. "Bull!" Sarah shouted over the chaos, over the sound of shouting and movement and panic. "The explosives!" Bull understood. He and Aldridge had placed shaped charges at key structural points while the others distracted Cartwright with conversation. Small charges, carefully positioned, enough to cause critical damage without bringing down the whole facility on their heads, enough to make the mountain unstable, enough to force evacuation. 30 seconds, Bull called back. He was fighting hand-to-hand with a soldier half his age, losing on points, but buying time, keeping the man occupied, keeping him from reaching a weapon or calling for help. Morrison saw, moved to assist, slammed his rifle stock into the other soldier's head. Hard, efficient. The man went down unconscious. Bull nodded thanks, kept moving, still functional, still dangerous despite his age. Sarah maintained her hold on Cartwright, felt him struggling, felt him trying to find leverage, trying to break free. But she had trained with the best, had learned every counter, every escape, and she had the advantage of surprise and position. "Call them off. Order your people to stand down or I will end you right here." "Never. Then they die, all of them, and you die with them. Is that what you want? Is that how you want your movement to end? You're not a killer, Sarah. I know you, taught you, shaped you. You don't have it in you to execute an unarmed prisoner. You're too moral, too principled, too much like the idealistic young operator I first met. You're right. I'm not a killer." She tightened her grip, pressed the gun harder. "But I am a soldier, and soldiers do what's necessary, what's required, what duty demands even when it costs everything." She could feel his pulse against her forearm, feel the tension in his body, feel the calculation happening in his mind. He was trying to find the angle, the move that would free him, the counter that would turn the situation back in his favor. But there was none. She had him, and they both knew it. An explosion shook the facility. One of Bull's charges detonating, deep underground, structural, then another, then a third. Support columns weakening, the mountain groaning. Ancient rocks shifting as modern engineering failed, as the carefully balanced forces that kept tons of stone suspended were disrupted. "What did you do?" Cartwright demanded. Fear in his voice now. Real fear, not for himself, for his people, for the vision that was collapsing around him. "What we came here to do, end this, stop you, save the country from your misguided attempt to save it." More soldiers were pushing into the command center, through doors that Elena had not managed to seal in time. Too many, more than expected. Cartwright had reserves they had not accounted for. Morrison was firing now, not warning shots, real engagement, controlled pairs, center mass, soldiers going down, others taking cover, returning fire. The command center became a battlefield, bullets sparking off metal, ricochets singing through the air, the confined space amplifying every sound, making every shot feel like thunder, making every impact feel like the end of the world. Dr. Rodriguez was crouched behind an overturned console, working frantically, treating a wound on Aldridge's arm. The general had taken a bullet, grazed but bleeding, still fighting but mortal, still determined but human. Rodriguez worked with practiced efficiency, field medicine, stopping bleeding, preventing shock, keeping the general functional. David had found a weapon, was firing from cover. Each shot deliberate, each shot placed with precision despite his injuries, despite months of torture and pain. The ghost proving he still had teeth, still had fight, still had purpose. "Sarah," Elena called, fear in her voice. Real fear. "I've locked out their communications. They can't coordinate with external units, can't call for backup. But I can't hold it forever. The system is trying to reboot, trying to override my override at Borneo. How long? 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then they get control back. That'll have to be enough. Another explosion. This one closer, louder, more violent. A support column cracking. The sound of tortured metal and failing concrete. Dust raining from the ceiling like toxic snow. The facility was coming apart. Not quickly, but inevitably. What Bull had started was spreading. The mountain was reclaiming its space. Cartwright was struggling now, really fighting, not trying to escape, but trying to reach his radio, trying to give orders, trying to save his people. You're going to kill everyone in this facility, all of my people, your people, everyone. I'm giving them a chance to surrender, a chance to live. If they take it, they survive. If they choose to keep fighting, that's their choice, their consequence. They're following orders, following me. They're not responsible. Then give them different orders. Tell them to stand down. Tell them it's over. Tell them to save themselves. Morrison was at the main door now, holding the position. Last defense. His rifle was nearly empty. Last magazine. He transitioned to his sidearm with practiced ease. Smooth draw, proper grip. His father's training showing through. The legacy living on. Elena was still at the console, still fighting the digital war. Sweat on her forehead. Fingers never stopping, never slowing. Security feeds are looping. They can't see what's happening in adjacent sections. They're operating blind, but it won't last. Systems too robust, too redundant. Good. Keep them that way as long as possible. Bull was down, not dead, but injured. Another leg wound. Different leg this time. He was trying to stand, failing, his strength finally giving out. Aldridge moved to him, helped him to cover, shielded him with his own body. Two old soldiers supporting each other. Two men who had given everything and were giving more. Who would give until there was nothing left to give. The facility shook again. Not an explosion this time, just structural failure. Pure physics. Cascade effect. What Bull had started spreading through the mountain. Support giving way. Weight redistributing. The ancient stone that had stood for millions of years groaning under the insult of human engineering failing. Cartwright, Sarah said urgently, pressing. This place is coming down. You can die here with your vision and your people. Or you can live. Face justice. Answer for what you've done. Let your people survive. Let them go home to their families. Choose. He was quiet for a moment, the noise of combat around them, the groaning of failing support structures, the shouts of wounded men, the screams of the dying, the reality of his dream collapsing, the vision he had built over years crumbling in minutes. If I surrender, he said, finally, voice broken, defeated, if I tell them to stand down, what happens to the architects? To the people who believed in me? Justice? Trials. Some will go to prison. Some will receive lesser sentences. Some will probably walk free depending on what they did. Courts will decide. Law will decide. The system you wanted to destroy will give them more mercy than you were willing to give anyone who opposed you. And me? You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, but you'll live. You'll have time to think, to understand, to maybe eventually see why you were wrong, why your path led to ruin rather than salvation. Cartwright looked around the command center, at his soldiers fighting and dying, at his operation crumbling, at the vision he had built being torn down by people he had trained, by students who had surpassed the teacher in the only way that mattered, by learning what he could not. That duty transcended grievance. That honor transcended victory. That some things were worth dying for precisely because they were not worth killing for. All units, he said quietly into his radio, voice hollow, empty. Stand down, cease fire. This is Deputy Director Cartwright. That's an order. Stop fighting. The shooting did not stop immediately. Training and momentum carried forward. Fear and adrenaline overriding reason. But gradually the gunfire slowed, diminished, stopped. Soldiers lowering weapons, looking confused, looking to their leadership for guidance that was not coming, looking for purpose in a moment where purpose had evaporated. This facility is compromised, Cartwright continued, voice strengthening, finding command again, even in defeat. Structural integrity is failing. All personnel evacuate to Rally Point Alpha immediately. We are standing down. Repeat. We are standing down. Save yourselves. Get out while you can. Sarah released him, pushed him toward Morrison. Secure him. Do it right. The young lieutenant zip-tied Cartwright's hands behind his back, read him his rights from memory, did it by the book, did it the way his father would have wanted, with dignity, with procedure, with respect for the law, even when the law was being applied to those who had tried to break it, even when every fiber wanted to make the prisoner hurt for all the damage he had caused. The command center was clearing, architects' soldiers evacuating, some helping wounded, some just running. The fight was gone out of them. Without Cartwright's certainty, without his conviction, they were just people who had made bad choices, who had followed a leader who promised salvation and delivered damnation, who now had to live with consequences they never imagined. "Elena," Sarah called, "can you stop the collapse?" "Negative. The damage is structural, deep. This whole level is going down, maybe the 2 levels above it, maybe more depending on how the weight redistributes. We need to evacuate now." "How long do we have?" 10 minutes. Maybe less, maybe more. Hard to predict, but we can't stay. "Then we move, everyone out. Leave nothing behind." They gathered their wounded, Bull leaning heavily on Aldridge, both men showing their age now, showing the cost of one more operation. One more fight, maybe the last one. Rodriguez helping David, supporting him, monitoring vitals even while moving. Morrison dragging Cartwright. Elena collecting her equipment. Sarah taking point, leading them out of the command center, through corridors that were buckling, past rooms filling with dust and debris, past evidence of human ambition collapsing under the weight of hubris. They passed architect soldiers on the way out, young men and women who had believed in something, who had followed a leader who promised purpose and change in a better world, who now looked lost and betrayed and afraid, who now understood that idealism without wisdom leads to disaster, that passion without restraint creates chaos, that certainty without doubt creates monsters. Sarah did not stop to reassure them, did not have time, did not have words that would help, but she hoped they would find their way back, hoped they would learn what she had learned, that the path to hell was paved with good intentions and the road to honor was narrow and hard and worth walking anyway, that choosing right over easy was what separated civilization from barbarism. The stairs stretched upward, level after level. Sarah counted them, focused on the count, on putting one foot in front of the other, on not thinking about the mountains settling behind them, about the tons of rock and concrete that could come down at any moment, about all the ways this could still go catastrophically wrong. Bull was struggling, could barely walk. His leg wounds were worse than he had admitted. Old man pride keeping him quiet, keeping him moving when movement was agony. Rodriguez had field-dressed both injuries, but the old soldier needed surgery, needed rest, needed things that could not happen while they were still in danger. "Leave me," Bull said, words costing him. "I'm slowing you down, endangering everyone." "Not a chance," Aldridge responded, firm, absolute. "We started this together. We finished together. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." "Marcus, be practical, be smart." "I've been practical for 40 years, been smart my whole career. Now I'm being loyal. Now I'm being what matters more than smart." They kept climbing. Cartwright was moving without resistance, defeated, broken. The man who had been larger than life reduced to just a man, just a prisoner, just someone who had believed too much in his own righteousness, who had confused conviction with truth, who had learned too late that being certain and being right were different things. Morrison led them now, young legs taking stairs 2 at a time, scouting ahead, clearing corners, checking for threats, proving himself with every action, proving his father had left a legacy worth honoring, that Robert Morrison's sacrifice had meaning because his son understood what that sacrifice was for. The facility shook again. Major structural failure. The mountain groaning. Geology reasserting itself over engineering. They were running out of time. Sarah could feel it, could feel the weight above them becoming unstable, could feel the moment of catastrophic collapse approaching like a storm on the horizon. Inevitable, terrible, coming. "Faster," she urged. "Everyone move faster. We're not dying in this hole." They emerged from the underground at level 1, ground level, where normal military personnel worked, where people looked up in shock as 7 blood-covered operators and 1 prisoner burst from a section that was supposed to be sealed, that was supposed to be abandoned, that was supposed to be empty. Alarms were sounding throughout the facility, evacuation orders being given over intercoms. The collapse was affecting more than just the abandoned levels, was threatening the entire complex, was forcing evacuation of active sections, hundreds of people streaming toward exits, organized chaos, military discipline maintaining order even in crisis. Sarah led her team outside, into daylight, into air that tasted like freedom and possibility. Behind them, the mountain rumbled. Behind them, the entrance collapsed. Behind them, the architect's headquarters ceased to exist, buried under tons of rock, sealed forever, a tomb for a dream that should never have been born. They kept moving, into the forest, away from the facility, away from the danger, Morrison supporting Bull on one side, Aldridge on the other. 3 generations of soldiers helping each other survive. Elena helping David, father helping daughter's friend. Dr. Rodriguez monitoring everyone with practiced eyes, looking for signs of shock or critical injury. Sarah flanking Cartwright, making sure the prisoner did not escape, did not find some last desperate way to turn defeat into something else. 2 miles into the forest, they stopped, found a clearing, collapsed in exhaustion, adrenaline fading, pain asserting itself, reality returning after the suspension of combat. Bull was unconscious, blood loss and pain and age finally claiming their due, the old warrior finally reaching his limit. Dr. Rodriguez went to work immediately. IV lines, pressure bandages, everything he could do with limited supplies and field conditions. His hands were steady, professional, decades of practice making the movements automatic. But his face was worried, his expression saying what his words did not. "He needs a hospital," the doctor said quietly. "Soon, real soon, or he won't make it. Too much blood loss, too much strain on a heart that's already compromised. Hours, not days." Sarah pulled out her satellite phone, called Fort Bragg Command, identified herself, requested immediate medical evacuation. Priority 1, life and death. The voice on the other end recognized her name, recognized the authority, promised help was coming. The helicopters arrived within 30 minutes, 2 of them. Medevac birds, medics and security, professional rescue. They loaded Bull carefully. Gentle hands, practiced efficiency. Dr. Rodriguez went with him, monitoring vitals, keeping the old soldier alive through expertise and will. Aldridge followed, would not leave his friend's side, would not let Bull face this fight alone. Cartwright was secured separately. Federal marshals had been waiting, had been coordinated by Aldridge before they entered Raven Rock, ready to take custody, ready to begin the process of justice. They loaded him onto the second helicopter, restrained, guarded, the end of his story beginning with cold professionalism. Before they took him away, Cartwright looked at Sarah one final time. "You were my best student, my greatest success." "No," Sarah said, tired, certain. "I was your most disappointing student, because I learned what you couldn't. That being strong doesn't mean being right. That having power doesn't mean you should use it. That true courage is restraint, not action. That serving is more important than commanding. History will judge which of us was correct, will judge whether I was visionary or traitor. History will judge that you were a man who started with honor and ended with treason, that you let grievance poison principle, that you forgot what you were fighting for and became what you were fighting against. That's the only judgment that matters, the only judgment that will stand." They took him away, into custody, into the system he had tried to overthrow, into justice that was imperfect but necessary, into a future that would not include freedom but might eventually include understanding. The clearing emptied. Just Sarah, Morrison, Elena, and David remained. 4 people who had gone into hell and come back. 4 people who had stopped something terrible at costs they were only beginning to calculate. 4 people who would carry this day for the rest of their lives. "What now?" Morrison asked. His voice was hollow, empty, coming down from combat high into the valley of aftermath. "Now we heal," Sarah said. "Now we help Bull recover. Now we make sure this never happens again. Now we figure out how to live with what we did and what we saw and what we became." And the architects? The ones who escaped? The ones who got away? They're being rounded up as we speak. The evidence David collected over 7 years. The confessions Cartwright will make to reduce his sentence. The intelligence Webb provided after his daughter was secured. The testimony we can all provide, every name, every operation, every crime, the organization is finished. Completely. They'll never rebuild from this. David sat heavily on a fallen log, exhausted beyond words. 7 years. 7 years of torture and lies and living in darkness. For this. For one day, for one operation. Was it worth it? Does it balance? Sarah sat beside him, put her arm around her brother, held him close. You saved the country, saved the Constitution, saved the principles we swore to defend, saved millions of people who will never know how close they came to losing everything. Yeah, it was worth it. Hard truth, but true truth. I'm tired, Sarah, so damn tired. Don't know how to keep going. I know. Me too, but we can rest now. Can go back to Montana, can teach kids to ride horses, can live quiet lives, can heal, can finally be at peace. You think Bull will recover? He's too stubborn to die. He'll recover, and he'll spend the rest of his life telling stories about how we saved the day, how the old man got one more victory, how stubborn beats strong every time. Elena approached. Her tablet was destroyed, covered in dust and blood, cracked screen, but she was smiling. Actually, smiling, genuine joy breaking through exhaustion. Uncle Marcus just radioed. Bull is stable. In surgery, but vital signs are good. Doctor says he'll live. Going to need physical therapy. Going to have a permanent limp. Going to be slower, but he'll live. He's going to make it. Relief flooded through Sarah. Overwhelming. Bull would live. The old man who had been father and teacher and friend would live. Would get to go home to Margaret. Would get to grow older with dignity. Would get to know that his final operation was successful, that he had made the difference one more time. Morrison was on his own phone, talking to someone in quiet tones. His voice was different now, softer, more vulnerable. Sarah could hear him talking about his father, about honor, about carrying forward a legacy, about doing something that mattered. When he hung up, he looked different, older, more settled, more at peace. My mother, he explained, told her I did something today that would have made Dad proud, that would have made him understand all his sacrifices were worth it. She cried, said she knew I would make him proud someday, said today was that day. You made him proud, Sarah said. Certain, absolute. Made all of us proud. Your father is smiling somewhere. Knowing his son became the man he hoped for. They waited in the clearing for transport back to Fort Bragg. Waited while the sun moved across the sky. Waited while adrenaline faded and pain took its place. Waited while the reality of what they had done settled into memory, into history, into legend. Sarah looked at her team, her family. Morrison, who had transformed from checkpoint guard to warrior in days. Who had killed for the first time and not broken. Who had honored his father's memory. Elena, who had fought a digital war while others fought with bullets. Who had proven that keyboards were weapons too. David, who had sacrificed 7 years to stop evil. Who had endured and survived and finally saw justice done. All of them damaged. All of them changed. All of them better for having stood when others would have run. For having chosen duty over safety. For having remembered that some things matter more than survival. And somewhere in a hospital, Bull was fighting his own battle. Fighting age and injury and exhaustion. Fighting to stay alive one more day. Fighting because that was what old soldiers did. They never surrendered, never gave up, never stopped serving. Even when the war was over, especially when the war was over. Because the war was never truly over. There would always be new threats, new challenges, new Cartwrights who believed their vision justified any action. New crises that required people to stand, to fight, to sacrifice. But today the good guys had won. Today honor had triumphed over convenience. Today the Constitution was safe. Today they had earned the right to rest. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. The hospital room was painted institutional white. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the sound of electricity and time passing. Bull Harrison lay in the bed connected to machines that beeped and monitored and measured the distance between life and death. His face was pale against the pillow. 70 years of living reduced to numbers on a screen. Sarah sat in the chair beside him, had been sitting there for 3 days, leaving only when nurses forced her out. Returning the moment visiting hours allowed, watching, waiting, holding vigil the way Bull had held vigil over her so many times before. Margaret Harrison sat across from her, 65 years old, silver hair pulled back, eyes that had cried themselves dry and then found more tears. She held Bull's hand like letting go would send him away forever. Held it with the grip of a woman who had shared 50 years with this man and was not ready for the story to end. "He's going to be fine," Margaret said. Said it like a prayer, like repetition could make it true. The doctor said the surgery was successful, said he just needs time to recover. "He will recover," Sarah assured her. "He's too stubborn to do anything else." "Stubborn? Yes. That's always been his way." Margaret smiled, sad, worn. "When we were young, I used to hate how stubborn he was, how he'd set his mind to something and nothing could change it. Now I'm grateful. That stubbornness is keeping him alive." The door opened. Dr. Rodriguez entered with a chart. Elena's father had stayed at the hospital, had personally overseen Bull's treatment, had made sure the old soldier received the best care possible. "How is he?" Sarah asked. "Stable, strong vitals. He's healing well for a man his age." De Rodriguez checked the monitors, made notes. "The leg wound was serious. We had to repair significant vascular damage. He'll need months of physical therapy, but he'll walk again, maybe with a cane, maybe with a limp, but he'll walk." "When will he wake up?" "Soon. We're reducing the sedation now. Should be conscious within hours." The doctor looked at Sarah, at Margaret. "He's lucky, very lucky. Another hour of blood loss and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Margaret squeezed Bull's hand tighter. "Thank you, doctor, for everything." "Thanks, Sarah. She's the one who got him out, got him help in time." Dr. Rodriguez left, quiet, professional, carrying the weight of too many lives saved and too many lives that could not be saved. Sarah stood, stretched, joints popping. 3 days of sitting had taken their toll. She walked to the window, looked out over Fort Bragg. The base continued its operations, soldiers training, equipment moving, life going on unaware of how close everything had come to collapsing. The architects were being rounded up, 73 arrests in 5 days, officers and enlisted, active duty and retired. People who had believed in Cartwright's vision, people who now faced courts-martial and federal charges and the end of careers they had built over decades. Some would go to prison, some would receive lesser sentences, some would probably walk free with ruined reputations and shattered futures. Justice was messy, imperfect, but necessary. Thomas Cartwright himself was in federal custody, held at a secure facility, facing charges that would keep him in prison for the rest of his natural life. He had stopped talking, stopped trying to explain, stopped trying to convince anyone of his righteousness. Just sat in his cell and stared at walls and contemplated the wreckage of his legacy. Sarah had visited him once, 2 days after his arrest, sat across from him in an interrogation room and looked at the man who had shaped her understanding of duty and honor and sacrifice. "Was it worth it?" she had asked. Cartwright had been quiet for a long time. "Then, I thought so. At the time, seemed like the only way, the necessary way. Now, I'm not sure I remember why it mattered so much. You were wrong about everything, about civilians, about oversight, about the military needing to control rather than serve." "I know." Those 2 words had carried the weight of decades. The weight of a man realizing too late that his certainty had been poison, that his conviction had led him away from truth rather than toward it. "What happens to you now?" Sarah had asked. "Prison. Death in prison, probably. I'm 62. Life sentence means exactly that." He looked at her. "What happens to you?" "I go home, back to Montana, back to my horses, back to teaching children, back to the life I built." "You're wasting your talents." "No, I'm using them for something that matters, something you never understood. That peace is harder than war, that building is harder than destroying, that living a good life is the ultimate victory." She had left him there, left him to his consequences, left him to whatever understanding might come in the years he had remaining. Left him knowing she had been right and he had been wrong, and that sometimes that was all the justice you got. Now, 3 days later, standing at the hospital window, Sarah felt the exhaustion catching up, felt the cost of everything they had done, felt the weight of violence and choices and outcomes that would echo for years. Behind her, Margaret spoke quietly. "He talks about you sometimes, when he thinks I'm not listening. Talks about how proud he is, how you're the daughter he never had, how you turned out better than he could have hoped." Sarah turned, saw the older woman watching her, saw kindness there and understanding. I love him, Sarah said simply. He saved me, gave me purpose when I had none, gave me family when I had none. Everything I am is because of him. He'd say the same about you, that you saved him, gave him purpose after retirement, gave him a reason to keep fighting. Margaret smiled. You're both wrong, of course. You saved each other. The machines beeped steadily. Bull's chest rose and fell, life continuing, heart beating, another day earned. The door opened again. Morrison entered. The young lieutenant looked different, older, changed by everything he had experienced. He wore a fresh uniform, captain's bars on his collar, promoted in the aftermath, recognized for his actions. Ma'am, he said, just wanted to check in, see how the colonel is doing. He's stable, should wake soon. That's good. That's real good. Morrison moved to the bedside, looked at Bull with something like reverence. He saved my life. During the extraction, took a hit that was meant for me. Never even hesitated. That's who he is, Margaret said, always putting others first. My father was like that. Guess that's why they were friends. Morrison looked at Sarah. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you something. When you go back to Montana, would it be all right if I visited sometimes? Not often, just occasionally, to learn, to understand what my father knew, what men like Colonel Harrison know. Sarah saw the sincerity in his eyes, saw the young man trying to become someone worthy of his inheritance. You're always welcome, Morrison, you and anyone else who wants to understand that the real victory is what you build after the battle. Thank you, ma'am. He saluted, sharp, precise, then left, back to his duties, back to the business of being a soldier in a world that still needed soldiers. Elena arrived an hour later. She carried flowers, set them on the table beside Bull's bed. Her tablet was gone, destroyed in the operation. She had requisitioned a new one, but it sat unused. Some things required distance before you could face them again. How is he, she asked. Strong, healing. Your father says he'll recover fully. Dad's good at what he does. If he says Colonel Harrison will recover, then he will. Elena sat, looked at the old man in the bed. He's a legend, you know. Stories about him go back decades. Things he did, operations he ran, people he saved. He'd hate hearing that. Bull never wanted to be a legend, just wanted to do his job. Maybe that's what makes someone a legend, doing the job without caring about recognition. Elena was quiet for a moment. General Aldridge is being promoted, taking over Joint Special Operations Command. First thing he wants to do is reform security protocols. Make sure nothing like the architects can happen again. That's good. That's what Bull would want. He wants you involved, consulting, helping design the new protocols. Sarah shook her head. I'm done with that life, done with operations and security and all of it. I'm going back to Montana. I understand, but the offer stands. If you change your mind. David entered next, moving better now, still bandaged, still healing, but functional, alive. He carried 2 cups of coffee, handed one to Sarah, sat beside her. How long are you planning to keep vigil, he asked. Until he wakes up, until I know he's really okay. He's okay, the doctors confirm it. You can rest. I'll rest when he opens his eyes and tells me to stop hovering. David smiled. Fair enough. He sipped his coffee. I've been debriefed 6 times, different agencies, FBI, CIA, military intelligence. Everyone wants to know everything about the architects. Everything I learned in 7 years. Are you telling them? Everything. Names, operations, plans, the whole network. It's over. Really over. They can't rebuild from this. Good. I've been offered a position, training new operators, teaching them what I learned, what we learned together. He looked at her. They want you too. Want the Sentinel to train the next generation. I'm not the Sentinel anymore. You'll always be the Sentinel, whether you want to be or not. It's who you are. No, it's who I was. Now I'm just Sarah Mitchell, horse trainer, teacher, someone who's done fighting. David nodded. I told them you'd say that. Told them not to push, that you'd earned the right to choose peace. They sat in comfortable silence, brother and sister, partners who had saved each other in the country, in the principles they had sworn to defend. Partners who now got to rest. Bull's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then clearing. He looked around the room, saw Margaret, saw Sarah, saw David, tried to speak. His throat was dry. Margaret brought water, helped him drink. How long? Bull's voice was rough, weak. 3 days, Margaret said. 3 days you've been sleeping while the rest of us worried. Always was good at sleeping. He managed a weak smile. We win? We won, Sarah confirmed. The architects are finished. Cartwright is in custody. The coup is stopped. We won. Good. That's good. His eyes closed, opened again, fighting exhaustion. David? I'm here, Bull. I'm okay, thanks to you. Thanks to all of us. Bull's hand found Margaret's, squeezed weakly. How bad am I? You'll live, Dr. Rodriguez said from the doorway. With physical therapy and rest, you'll even walk again. But your days of field operations are over. They were already over. I'm 68. Should have stopped years ago. But you didn't, Sarah said. You kept going, kept fighting, kept protecting. Had to. Had people worth protecting. Bull looked at her, really looked. You did good, kid. Real good. Proud of you. Sarah felt tears threatening. Blinked them back. You taught me everything. I taught you tactics. You taught yourself honor. Big difference. Margaret was crying now. Relief and joy and exhaustion all mixing together. Don't you ever scare me like that again, William Harrison. Don't you dare. Yes, ma'am, I'll do my best. Dr. Rodriguez checked vitals. Made notes. He needs rest, real rest. Everyone out except Mrs. Harrison. You can visit again this evening. They filed out. Sarah, David, Elena. Morrison had returned and stood in the hallway. They gathered in the waiting room. A family forged in fire. A team that had faced impossible odds and survived. What now, Elena asked. Now we heal, Sarah said. Now we go back to our lives. Now we remember why we fought. To protect the innocent, Morrison said. To defend the Constitution, David added. To preserve honor, Elena finished. Sarah looked at them. These people who had become family. And to earn the right to peace. The right to quiet mornings and simple days. The right to be normal. They dispersed gradually. Elena back to Fort Bragg. Morrison to his duties. David to another debriefing. Sarah remained. Sat in the waiting room. Watched the sun track across the sky through large windows. Watched the bass continue its rhythms outside. She thought about Montana, about her ranch, about the horses that needed feeding and the children who needed teaching, about the Miller girl who was probably posting better now, about the Rodriguez boy who had overcome his fear, about the life she had built and abandoned and would return to. She thought about Cartwright, about how a good man had become twisted by bitterness and certainty, about how easy it was to believe your cause justified any action, about how important it was to question yourself even when you were sure you were right. She thought about Bull, about Margaret, about Morrison's father and all the other soldiers who had given everything, about the cost of service and the weight of duty and the price of honor. And she thought about the future, about whether evil would rise again in different forms, about whether new Cartwrights would emerge, about whether the work of defending freedom was ever truly finished. The answer was no. It was never finished. But that did not mean you had to fight forever. Sometimes passing the torch was the most important thing you could do. Sometimes teaching the next generation was more valuable than fighting yourself. Sometimes knowing when to stop was the hardest and most important choice. Evening came. Sarah returned to Bull's room. He was awake, sitting up, color returning to his face. Margaret was feeding him soup. The mundane intimacy of a long marriage. The quiet care that sustained love over decades. Sarah, Bull said, sit, talk to me. She sat. What do you want to talk about? Your plans. You're going back to Montana. I am. Good. That's where you belong. Teaching, building, living. He paused. But I need you to promise me something. What? If this happens again, if something like the architects rises, if the country needs the Sentinel, you'll answer. You'll come back. You'll do what needs doing. Sarah was quiet, thought about what he was asking, thought about the pain and the weight and the burden of being who she had been. I can't promise that, Bull. I can't promise I'll be ready. Can't promise I'll be willing. Can't promise I won't have moved past all of this. Fair enough. Then promise me this. If the next generation needs guidance, if Morrison or Elena or someone else comes asking how to be what we were, you'll teach them. You'll pass on what you know. You'll make sure the legacy continues. That she could promise, that she would do. Yes, I promise that. I'll teach anyone who asks, who really wants to learn, who understands that being a warrior is about more than fighting. That's all I need. Bull relaxed back into his pillow. Margaret and I are retiring, really retiring, moving to Florida, buying a small house near the beach. going to spend our remaining years in peace. You've earned it. So have you. So has everyone who served. But earning it and taking it are different things. You have to give yourself permission to be happy. I'm working on it. Work harder. Life's too short to spend it all looking over your shoulder. Margaret stood, kissed Bull's forehead. I'm going to get coffee. You two finish your conversation. She left. Sarah and Bull alone, teacher and student, father and daughter, two people who had been through hell together and come out the other side. I'm scared, Sarah admitted. Scared that I won't be able to go back, won't be able to be normal, won't be able to forget what we did, what I did. You're not supposed to forget. You're supposed to remember and live anyway. Supposed to carry it and not let it crush you. Supposed to honor the sacrifices by building something good. Bull's voice was firm, strong. You've spent 7 years running from who you were. Time to stop running. Time to integrate. To be both Sarah Mitchell, the operator, and Sarah Mitchell, the teacher, both at once. I don't know how. You figure it out. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one student at a time. That's how healing works. Slowly, with intention, with help from people who care about you. Morrison appeared in the doorway. Sir, sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. An elderly man entered, 80 years old if he was a day, wearing a faded army uniform from another era. Vietnam patches, Distinguished Service Cross, a warrior from a different generation. William Harrison, the old man said, I heard you got yourself shot. Thought I should check on you. Bull's eyes widened. General Thompson, sir, I didn't expect. Course you didn't. I'm supposed to be dead, but I'm too stubborn for that. Thompson moved to the bedside. Heard about what you did, what your team did, stopping the architects, protecting the Constitution. That's real soldiering, son, the kind that matters. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. Thank your people. Thank everyone who stood when they could have run. Thompson looked at Sarah. You're the Sentinel. Heard about you. Legendary operator. Now you're legendary for stopping a coup. Hell of a resume. Just doing my duty, sir. Duty. Good word. Important word. You understand it. Wish more people did. He turned back to Bull. You're retiring. Good. Spend time with your wife. Enjoy your remaining years. You've earned it. But if anything like this happens again, if the country needs you, I know you'll answer. I will, sir. Always. Thompson nodded, saluted. Bull returned it from his bed. The old general left, a ghost from the past offering blessing to the present. That's why we do this, Bull said quietly. That's why we serve. So men like General Thompson can see that the work continues, that the next generation is worthy, that the country survives. Sarah understood, felt the weight of legacy, felt the responsibility of carrying forward what others had built, felt the hope that maybe she could teach someone to carry it further. 6 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell returned to Montana. David came with her. Dar Rodriguez had cleared him for travel, for life, for rebuilding. He would stay at the ranch for a while, would heal in the clean air and quiet spaces, would learn what Sarah had learned about finding peace after war. The horses recognized her, came to the fence, nickered greetings. She fed them carrots, ran her hands along their necks, felt the solid reality of muscle and warmth in simple animal presence. The Miller girl was the first to return for lessons. 12 years old, eager. Her posting had improved. She rode with more confidence, more grace. When the lesson ended, she asked Sarah where she had been. Family emergency, Sarah said. Sometimes life interrupts plans. Is everything okay now? Yes, everything's okay now. The girl smiled, believed it, rode away happy. And Sarah realized it was true. Everything was okay. Not perfect, not healed, but okay. And okay was enough. David watched from the porch. You're good at this. Teaching, building, creating something positive. It's what I should have been doing all along. No, you needed to be the Sentinel first, needed to learn what you learned, needed to become who you are. Now you get to choose what to do with it. Morrison visited in September. Came for a weekend, learned to ride horses, learned to fix fence, learned to do the work that did not involve weapons or tactics or violence. He was quieter now, more thoughtful. The combat had changed him in ways he was still discovering. I'm thinking about long-term, he told Sarah on his last evening, about whether I stay in the Army, about what I want my life to be. What do you want it to be? Something that matters, something my father would respect, something that builds instead of destroys. Then do that. The army can be that, or civilian life can be that. The work is what matters, not the uniform. You really believe that? I do. Took me years to learn it, but I do. Elena visited in October. Brought her father. Dada Rodriguez admired the ranch, admired the peace Sarah had built. He and David spent hours talking about healing, about trauma, about recovery, about building new lives from broken pieces. Elena walked with Sarah through the pasture. I'm leaving active duty, taking a position with a think tank, helping design security protocols. No more field work, no more operations. How do you feel about that? Relieved, scared, hopeful, all at once. Elena smiled. Uncle Marcus says I'm making the right choice. Says knowing when to stop is wisdom. He's right. What about you? Any regrets? Sarah looked around. At the mountains, at the sky, at the land she had chosen. No regrets. This is where I belong. This is what I was meant to do. Bull and Margaret visited in November, just before Thanksgiving. Bull walked with a cane now, slowly. But he walked. He spent his days sitting on the porch, watching Sarah teach, watching David work with the horses, watching peace unfold in real time. You did good, kid, he said on the last evening. Built something real here, something lasting. I learned from the best. You learned from yourself. I just pointed the direction. Margaret cooked Thanksgiving dinner, turkey and stuffing and all the traditional excess. They gathered around the table. Sarah and David and Bull, and Margaret and Morrison, who had driven up for the holiday, and Elena and her father, who had come from Virginia. A family, not by blood, by choice, by shared experience, by bonds forged in fire and maintained in peace. Bull raised his glass to Sarah for reminding us what we fight for showing us how to live after fighting, for being the Sentinel when we needed her and Sarah Mitchell when she needed to be. They drank, they ate, they talked late into the night about everything and nothing, about the past and the future, about the cost of service and the reward of peace, about what it meant to be warriors who chose to be farmers, soldiers who chose to be teachers, fighters who chose to build. And Sarah understood something she had not understood before, that you could be both, could be the Sentinel and Sarah Mitchell, could carry the weight of what you had done and still move forward into something better, could honor the past without being trapped by it. Winter came, snow covered the mountains, the ranch settled into quiet rhythms. Sarah taught fewer lessons but taught them better. Spent time writing, documenting what she had learned, creating guides for the next generation, passing forward what Bull had passed to her. David stayed, made the ranch his home, learned to train horses, learned to work with his hands, learned that healing was possible if you gave yourself permission. He would carry scars, physical and mental, but he would carry them forward into a life worth living. On Christmas Eve, Sarah stood outside in the snow, looking at stars that seemed closer in the cold, clear air, thinking about the year, about what they had stopped, about what they had saved, about the pardon and the reward and the meaning of it all. Morrison's words came back to her, about wanting to do something that mattered, about building instead of destroying, and she realized that both were true. Sometimes you destroyed to protect. Sometimes you fought to preserve peace. Sometimes violence was the price of continued existence. But that did not mean violence had to define you, did not mean war had to be who you were. You could be a warrior and a teacher, could be a fighter and a builder, could be the Sentinel and Sarah Mitchell, could be whole. Inside the house, David was making hot chocolate. The radio played Christmas carols. The wood stove radiated warmth. Life continued in small, beautiful moments that meant everything because they were earned. Sarah went inside, into the warmth, into the life she had built, into the peace she had finally given herself permission to inhabit. Bull called on Christmas morning. "Merry Christmas, kid." "Merry Christmas, Bull. How's Florida?" "Warm, boring, perfect." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Margaret sends her love, says you need to visit." "I will, when the snow melts." "Good. Listen, Sarah, I want you to know something. I'm proud of you. Prouder than I've ever been. Not because of what you did at Raven Rock, but because of what you're doing now. Choosing life, choosing peace, choosing to teach instead of fight. That takes more courage than combat ever did. Thank you. That means everything." "You're welcome. Now go enjoy your day. Enjoy your life. You've earned it." They hung up. Sarah stood holding the phone, feeling the weight of his blessing, feeling the freedom of his approval, feeling the possibility of a future unconstrained by past. David handed her hot chocolate. What did Bull say? That I should enjoy my life. Good advice. Are you going to take it? Sarah looked around. At the ranch, at the mountains, at the snow falling softly outside the window, at the life she had built from wreckage and determination and the refusal to give up. Yes, she said, I think I am. And she meant it. The years passed. Sarah taught generations of children, taught them about horses and responsibility and courage, taught them that strength was not about fighting, but about choosing not to fight when you could, taught them that real victory was building something worth protecting. Morrison left the Army after 10 years, became a teacher himself, high school, history and civics, teaching young people about the Constitution and duty and the cost of freedom. He visited the ranch every summer, brought his own children eventually, passed forward what he had learned. Elena married, had a family, worked in cybersecurity for the government, preventing the next architects, building systems that protected without oppressing. She sent Christmas cards every year, photos of her children, updates on her life, proof that warriors could become parents, could become normal. David never left the ranch, made it his home, his sanctuary, his monastery. He trained horses with patience that came from understanding trauma, worked with rescued animals, gave them second chances because he had been given second chances, lived quietly, peacefully, gratefully. Bull and Margaret lived to see grandchildren that were not theirs by blood, but were theirs by love. Lived to see Morrison succeed, lived to see David heal, lived to see Sarah build something lasting. They died within months of each other at ages that were a gift, died knowing their legacy continued, that the work would go on, that the next generation understood. And Sarah kept teaching, kept building, kept living the life she had earned through sacrifice and courage, and the willingness to stand when others could not. The Sentinel became a story, a legend, something people spoke about in hushed tones, the operator who stopped a coup, who saved the country, who disappeared into legend and peace. But Sarah Mitchell was real, was present, was teaching a 12-year-old girl how to post without bouncing, was repairing a fence, was feeding horses on a Montana morning, was living proof that warriors could choose peace, that fighters could build, that the end of war did not have to be the end of meaning. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done and the stars were bright, she would stand on her porch and remember. Remember Bull and Margaret, remember Morrison's father, remember everyone who had fought and sacrificed and given everything so that others could have mornings like this. And she would give thanks, not to God necessarily, not to country, but to the simple fact that she had survived, had chosen, had built something good from something hard, that she had been the sentinel when needed. And Sarah Mitchell, when the world allowed, that she had been both and survived being both. And that was victory enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.